CultfiggaTvNews TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Mean of Revolution. And it is a funeral for the Democratic Party today, y'all. Oh, how sad they are. First, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button, like, share, subscribe to the platform, share. Let everybody know Cultfigga is on. We got late night revolutionary studies. Trump gets immunity in most cases. The Democrats are so shocked and pissed. But when we listen to what they're saying, you're going to understand that the president has been a dictator. Nothing can stop him. And you're going to see that they're pissed that now people know Trump has the same immunity that Bush had or Barack Obama had, and they can't stand it.
The other big story in our show today is in our Law and Justice lead. The U.S. Supreme Court earlier today ruled that Donald Trump is entitled to some immunity from criminal prosecution for acts he took, official acts, when he was president. And now the lower courts must decide which acts are official, which are not, which means that Trump.
I want y'all to pay attention to when the Supreme Court say the U.S. president has full immunity over all acts he commit officially in his job as president. Now, what makes that so disgusting? Yes, that's going to cover everything Trump did. To Democrats are pissed. Everything Trump did that they're charging him with, he did in the capacity officially as a president. Even if he was trying to, imagine this, even if he was trying to election interfere, that's in the capacity of a U.S. president. It wasn't his side job. Now, if they would have found out he was trying to scam some money on the side for himself, that's different. But what makes this so disgusting is what they really covering and saying if you're a U.S. president and you commit mass murder like Bush, or you kill Gaddafi and black people put in cages like Obama, that's as the capacity of a U.S. president, you have full immunity. This is really disgusting, but the U.S. Supreme Court had to protect Trump like they protected every other president. The president can do whatever he wants. He's a dictator as long as he's doing it in the capacity of a president.
January 6th case is unlikely to happen before November's election, if at all. CNN's Paula Reed has more on how we got to today's ruling.
Presidents have to be given total immunity. They have to be allowed to do their job.
The Supreme Court partially siding with former President Donald Trump in his ongoing January 6th case, ruling that former presidents are entitled to some immunity from prosecution for official actions, but not for private conduct. In the 6-3 opinion, Chief Justice John Roberts, writing for the majority, at least with respect to the president's exercise of his core constitutional powers, this immunity must be absolute.
This immunity must be absolute. What they're protecting is the image of the U.S. president, so he never can be convicted for murder. He never can be convicted for committing war crimes. That what they just said today is no matter what the U.S. president do as the U.S. president, nobody can convict him. He has absolute dictator authority. Now, the Democrats are pissed because that's law now. Everything Trump was trying to do, he absolutely did as the executive, as a president, and was trying to do it to continue to be a president of the United States. They know that's a fact.
The president enjoys no immunity for his unofficial acts, and not everything the president does is official. The president is not above the law. The high court, though, leaving it up to lower courts to determine which actions are official and therefore immune. Roberts writing other allegations, such as those involving Trump's interactions with the vice president, state officials, and certain private parties, and his comments to the general public, present more difficult questions. Meaning District Court Judge Tanya Chutkan, who is overseeing Trump's January 6th case, will need to decide whether Trump's pressure campaign to get Vice President Pence.
If Mike Pence does the right thing, we win the election.
Georgia state officials.
I just want to find 11,780 votes.
Got immunity,
which is one more than we have, because we won the state.
And others to overturn the 2020 election results.
What they don't understand is he did all that in the capacity of a U.S. president to continue to be U.S. president. The court has ruled today. So they could go back and try to overthrow the court ruling. The court just told them if he did it, In the capacity of U.S. president, now, if you had caught him online saying, hey, we're going to take a percentage of everything the U.S. make and skim it off for Trump business, that's outside the capacity. He could have been convicted for that. Salute. If they caught him doing anything outside the capacity, all this BS they talking about Trump did was in the capacity as the president and the state president. That's why we watch these mainstream medias. They sick as hell today and mad at the Supreme Court because they know they just proved the U.S. Well, we all knew forever. U.S. president is a damn dictator and never supposed to be convicted for nothing he do.
For official acts. Trump celebrating the decision on social media, posting big win for our Constitution and democracy. Justice Sonia Sotomayor dissenting from the majority opinion, writing, the relationship between the president and the people he serves has shifted irrevocably. In every use of official power, the president is now a king above the law. Something she and other liberal justices warned about during oral arguments in April.
I'm trying to understand what the disincentive is from turning the Oval Office into, the seat of criminal activity in this country.
The decision today likely to hamstring special counsel Jack.
Do you hear this? You see, that is a liberal Democratic Supreme Court justice saying they're trying to keep the U.S. presidency from becoming a seat of criminality. Lady, who the fuck are you fooling? The U.S. president been the biggest crook on the planet forever. Been the biggest murderer. Been committing the biggest war crimes. Been pushing the most drugs. Been doing the most child trafficking. Been doing the most drug trafficking. Been doing the most kidnapping. Been doing the most maiming. Been doing the most international bank crimes. Been doing the most polluting. Huh? We could go on over. We could keep going. The U.S. president, that's where most of the crime takes place at. But they tried to pretend like Trump was turning it into some criminal activity. They didn't open up a can of worms and say, wait a minute. You saying that you didn't find nothing criminal in Bush? He killed 1 million people. In Obama, he illegally killed Gaddafi and then black people was put in cages. No criminality there. Supreme Court had to come out and say, wait a minute. The president has full immunity as he's doing stuff in his capacity as a president, or else they was going to open up see, these Democrats are stupid. They don't know the Supreme Court just protected Bill Clinton, Biden, all of them is war criminals, but they trying to focus on Trump so much they can't see the damn forest for the trees.
Jack Smith's election subversion case.
Charging Donald J. Trump with conspiring to defraud the United States, conspiring to disenfranchise voters, and conspiring and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding.
Roberts making clear in his majority opinion that Trump's discussions with Justice Department officials and his official conversations with the then vice president are immune. And in another blow for Smith, Roberts says Trump's official acts cannot be considered even as evidence at trial. A trial in this case, though, now highly unlikely before the November election. But of course, the former president has many other legal cases he is facing. And the next event on his legal calendar is next week, a sentencing in the New York criminal case. Now, sources tell me we can expect Trump's legal team will use today's Supreme Court opinion to attack that conviction. Specifically, they're going to use this opinion to try to get thrown out portions of Hope Hicks's testimony, as well as some tweets that were introduced as evidence. Now, it's unclear if this opinion will be enough to upend that case. But clearly, Jake, today's Supreme Court opinion giving Trump's lawyers a lot to work with over the next few months.
All right, Paula Reed, outside the court. Thank you so much. Let's bring in my legal panel, Tim Parlatore. Let me start with you. What was your reaction to today's Supreme Court ruling?
It's very similar to what I expected. I wasn't necessarily expecting them to cut it into the 3 pieces as they did of the absolute immunity, presumptively immune, and then not immune. But I think that it does make sense to me based on how it has developed that they were going to find some form of immunity and then define contours and then kick it back down to the district court to actually have a hearing and figure out how does this rule apply to this case.
Victoria, what did you think?
Well, I was saddened because, they didn't start out the same way they did in the Clinton case or the Nixon tapes case with a very, powerful statement that no one is above the law. They left that till the end. And the court created a lot of doctrine that is entirely new, that's not judicially restrained, in my view, and that the district court's going to have to deal with as to the division between, and your listeners are going to know about official versus unofficial acts, what is private, what isn't. No one thought that if someone does an official statement or if Obama sends drones, that he can be, criminally prosecuted for that. But what about SEAL Team 6?
Right.
What about that hypothetical by Judge Pan in the DC Circuit? So he orders SEAL Team 6 to assassinate his political rival. Is that official or is that private?
Yeah. Tim, how quickly do you think there could be an evidentiary hearing on this matter about what is official, what is not
these
official?
People, Trump told these people, I could commit a murder and you couldn't do nothing to me. As long as he told them I could take out my political opponent, and they said, "Oh, dare him." The man was telling the truth. If he do it in the capacity of U.S. president, but they know this, they've been doing it for far too long. The people didn't know this and understand what type of monster this government really was. Trump just was telling the truth. That's why they want to get rid of him. You goddamn right. He could take out his political opponents using SEAL Team 6 in the capacity of a U.S. president. The Supreme Court just said it today.
What can Trump be prosecuted for? What can he not? How quickly could they call Vice President Pence or Mark Meadows or anyone to the stand to get out?
I hear you think Dr. King got whacked. Malcolm got whacked. Fred Hampton got whacked. How the hell you think nobody ever wanted to? How you think? Because this was in the political capacity. The president signed off on all that shit. They got immunity. Along with the head of the FBI, they got immunity. They done it all in the capacity. JFK got whacked. That's in the capacity of the vice president. That's real talk, man. These people, but it's trying to convict Trump done brought it all to the light. All the dirty business getting aired now.
This information, grand jury testimony, and evidence.
I think they can do it pretty quickly. And that's, the interesting thing about this decision to me. Setting aside, the legal precedent of how this is going to affect future administrations, as applied to Donald Trump, both sides are going to kind of get what they want because they can have a pretrial hearing right now. And she could do it very quickly. They already have all the discovery. They just need to get a conference together with the judge and figure out a schedule. Because it's going to be before the judge instead of a jury, you can do it on non-consecutive days. So you can do it 3 days here, 2 days there. And also because it's a pretrial hearing, rules of evidence don't apply. So they can bring in agents to kind of summarize the evidence. They can bring in Mike Pence. They can bring in Mark Meadows. They can bring in all these people. So everything that people are saying, well, we want the American people to know this before the election, that can all be brought out in the pretrial hearing. So everybody who wants it out, they can get what they want. And the people that don't want there to be a trial before the election, they get what they want to.
What do you think of that?
I think it's fascinating. And I think we are going to see Judge Chutkan be asked by Jack Smith to move very quickly. Judges can move quickly. The Nixon Supreme Court decided in 2 weeks. I think that if they have the will to do that, they can bring in a lot of the evidence other than official acts. And it will, because this was an attempt to steal an election through fraudulent electors. Those cases are still pending in the state courts. That is all private, as Justice Barrett said in the argument. So they can bring in all of that evidence. And so in that case, in that sense, the case is still alive. And interestingly enough, whether it was intended or not by the chief, there will be a very big hearing, I assume.
Tim, part of Justice Sotomayor's scathing dissent today says, quote, in every use of official power, the president is now a king above the law, orders the Navy SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival, immune, organizes a military coup to hold on to power, immune, takes a bribe in exchange for a pardon, immune. Is that accurate?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that may be a little bit more political rhetoric there. There is what they've done in laying out the things that are absolutely immune versus presumptively immune. I think that a lot of those things will fall under the presumptive, where prosecutors can present evidence that it was not for the proper purpose. And also, I don't think that there's anything in this decision that would impact the ability to impeach a president.
Yeah.
And so, the impeachment wouldn't be affected here at all. And so then they're, kind of the inverse of what Trump's attorneys argue with the impeachment judgment rule. If they impeach him for having a SEAL team assassinate his opponent, does then that, remove the immunity entirely?
And Victoria, Justice Amy Coney Barrett, she sided with the majority in the ultimate decision, which was 6-3, but she did take issue with how the court ruled that evidence from Trump's officials' acts should be excluded from trial. She didn't like how they intervened and said what was evidence and what was not evidence. Could this have an effect on what happens going forward?
It could have an effect on what's going on below, because there are a lot of ambiguities in this opinion. What's amazing is how difficult it's going to be to parse this and the other opinions that's been coming down in the last week. they're all creating a fair amount of uncertainty in the areas of law. So you're going to see arguments in the evidentiary hearing about whether certain things can come into evidence or not using her theory. There's a whole set of questions behind this, and I don't want to get too technical, that will also be raised about the nature of the statute. She raised this. There's an argument that if you don't say president in the statute, that in fact you cannot actually indict under that. So there's all sorts of things that are going to come up in this new hearing. And, we'll see how it goes. I think Chutkan probably is going to, have a very different view of some of these things, more along the lines of the dissenters. So we'll see what happens.
All right. Thanks to both of you for being here. Really appreciate it.
Former President Trump and his allies are celebrating today's historic Supreme Court decision. Trump touting the 6-3 ruling on presidential immunity as a big win for our Constitution and democracy, while House Speaker Mike Johnson calls it a victory for the former president and a defeat for what he deemed President Biden's weaponized Department of Justice and Jack Smith, who is, of course, a special counsel. CNN's Kristen Holmes is here with more on this. All right, Kristen, you have the Trump campaign saying this. Tell us more about this and also how this decision impacts their plans moving forward.
Well, so just remember, yes, they are celebrating this, but they didn't actually get what they wanted in full. Right. They wanted blanket immunity. So, but what this does is this actually helps them with this idea that Donald Trump will likely no longer have to go to trial ahead of the election. What they were hoping for was anything. They actually got more than what they were hoping for originally. They were hoping for any kind of limited immunity that would essentially have to kick the case back to Chutkan, which this does, because she is going to have to determine.
People just get on TV and the same thing. Now, first he said he was hoping for full blanket immunity. Then she said they was just hoping for anything. You see, the people say anything on TV.
What was an official act and what was an unofficial act. And then there's going to have to be some litigation around all of that. It seems very unlikely. Now, obviously, we don't know this, but it seems unlikely that Chutkan is going to do this in a vacuum. We are likely going to hear from both sides as they weigh in to these different actions that are going to be deemed either official or unofficial and therefore covered by immunity. And one thing to know going into this is that this was really, this January 6th case with Judge Chutkan, it was the last looming potential case for them that would go to trial before the election. They know she was moving fast. They know she said she wanted this to happen before the election. They thought there was still a chance it was going to go on the table, even if it would be right up in September or October. Now it appears that is done. And because of that, they are very happy and they are celebrating because Donald Trump is going to focus on one thing now, which is the election in November.
Yeah, it allows him to do that. Kristen Holmes, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Pamela?
All right, Brianna, thanks so much. Liberal justices on the high court say this decision sends a very different message. Chilling words from Justice Sotomayor's dissent, who said the decision makes a mockery of the principle that no man is above the law. A portion of her dissent reading, quote, "Let the president violate the law. Let him exploit the trappings of his office for personal gain. Let him use his official power for evil ends, because if he knew that he may one day face liability for breaking the law, he might not be as bold and fearless as we would like him to be." That is the majority's message today. For more on this historic decision, let me bring in CNN political commentator and former defense secretary during the Trump administration, Mark Esper. His book, A Sacred Oath, is out now, and he serves on the board or as a strategic advisor for a handful of aerospace and defense-related companies. Secretary, welcome to the show. So just to recap for our viewers, then President Trump fired you in part because you opposed using the military to crack down on protests over the death of George Floyd. Chief Justice John Roberts dismisses Sotomayor's doomsday prophecies. Do you?
Well, first of all, good afternoon, Pamela. Good to be with you. And I should add that I'm not a lawyer, so take that for what it's worth. But I do dismiss the doomsday scenarios. And the reason why is, first, I just believe it's fantastical that this notion of somehow the president order SEAL Team 6 to kill a political opponent. I don't like using that, talking about it, because I think it risks politicizing the military further. And so, but that said, look, the president has a constitutional duty to protect the United States. So clearly he can use the military force outside the country, but he doesn't have the authority to employ military force against political opponents within the country. And I think as I interpret the reading and talk to others of this decision, that's kind of where the line gets drawn.
Okay, so I just want to be clear, and I understand you don't want to politicize the military, but this example was used during the oral arguments and now in Justice Sotomayor's dissent. So it is important to discuss. So, you know, if you were defense secretary for Trump, if you were still serving in the Trump administration, this ruling had been in place and that order was given to you and a political rival was outside of the United States, would you feel bound to follow the order to execute on what the president was telling you to do, given the ruling today?
How disgusting, man. How disgusting. Okay, now just say you still were working for Trump and this ruling came down and Trump ordered you to kill his opponent. I was all this bullshit. Lady, what the hell are y'all talking about? Trump ain't the man that whack nobody. You need to worry about who Joe Biden. And have you ever heard of the Clinton kill list? You see, this is disgusting. They act like we don't know about the Clinton kill list. Oh, we know the president has immunity because we know about Bill Clinton and all of the immunity he done had since he was the governor of Arkansas. But they want to tell you about Trump imaginary. He might whack a political opponent. All of the Clinton friends who shot themselves in the back of the head 9 times. Get out of here.
No, I would refuse. I believe it is an illegal order, and I believe that the uniformed military would also refuse such an order because it would be illegal.
Lies.
And so, and I'm confident that that's what the military would do going forward as well. So that's my view on it. Now, you mentioned earlier about the case of protesters in the streets of Washington, D.C. There are things that the president can do that may be lawful, but we often call awful. And he has the authority to do it.
The FBI planned assassination of Occupy Wall Street, Houston. See, these people are a joke. Wasn't no Donald Trump in office when these people was plotting to kill the leader of Occupy Wall Street in Houston. Kill him, whack him, get rid of him, take him out. That's a political opponent, a U.S. individual that these people talking about killing. But they want to tell you, well, what if Trump tried to? Well, what about when you was in office and y'all been trying to kill people in America who y'all disagree with politically? Even protesters who say they're going to occupy some area. Come on, man. This is disgusting. But we got to pay attention to this. You see, they don't want to talk about all the murder that they done did politically. It's what if Trump ever tries to do what we've been doing? That's what they want to talk about.
In this case, given that example of using the military to kill a political opponent, no, my view is that's an illegal order. That's not part of his constitutional duties. That's a law enforcement. That would be an action being to consider arresting or pursuing charges against somebody if the president believed they were somehow promoting a conspiracy or trying to overturn the government. That would be a law enforcement issue, certainly not a military issue.
So I want to go back to then, going back to President Trump firing you because of opposing your opposition to using the military force when it came to the George Floyd protests. So under that, given the ruling today, would you have held firm on your stance, given what we just heard from the Supreme Court, or would you have had a different position?
Well, I think you have to parse out the example a little bit more. What I opposed was the president using the active duty military in the streets of Washington, D.C. I thought that was inappropriate. I thought that the better steps, and still do, and I wrote about this in my memoir, as you cited, that this is a law enforcement action first and foremost. It should be handled by Washington, D.C. law enforcement, if not the district, then federal law enforcement, and if not that, then of course the National Guard. And that's eventually where, in my opposition to him, we walked him back to that point where we had the D.C. National Guard out there and not pushing back on protesters, but defending federal buildings and federal property. And it was ultimately law enforcement, civilian law enforcement, that took action against with regard to pushing back the protesters. So, look, my view is still the same, that there are things that are legal and things that are illegal, and then there are things that are appropriate and things that are inappropriate. And that's kind of how I would carve up these decisions and would do so going forward if that were ever the case again.
Let me just push back a little bit, though, because, the FBI, law enforcement, it's under the executive branch, right? And as president, when Trump was president, he was head of executive branch as president of the United States under Article 2 of the Constitution. And so do you think it would be harder to push back then in light of this ruling today saying that if a president is acting in his official duties, that there would be immunity. And in the Trump case, it talked about the Justice Department, that the conversations that Trump had with the Justice Department, which is also under the executive branch, that actually would be protected. The president would be protected with immunity because those are that's under the official acts category.
Yeah, look, I'd have to think through it a little bit more, but the issue at the time was not, immunity from official acts. The question at the time was, did he have the authority to employ active duty forces on the streets of Washington, D.C.? And the fact is, yes, he did after he invoked the Insurrection Act. That was the piece that I opposed, that Bill Barr opposed. And so to me, that was the hurdle, was should he invoke the Insurrection Act? I thought it was inappropriate to do so, but it was completely lawful for him to do so if he wanted. Again, I thought the better approach was to use law enforcement. And then if not law enforcement, if law enforcement was not up to the task, then use the National Guard, since the National Guard has a dual mission, which includes support the civilian law enforcement authorities.
All right, Mark Esper, thank you for coming on and sharing your perspective. You certainly have interesting perspective given your history as well as the former defense secretary under Trump. Appreciate it. Let's bring in our legal and political experts on this. Elliot, do you first lay it out for us? How does this ruling impact the power of the presidency? Why should every single American at home care about this?
It is much harder to hold a president accountable for misconduct right now than it was 12 hours ago. And that's a simple fact. I think the issue here is that the court has left more questions than they've answered. And so, for instance,
when have they ever held a president accountable for misconduct? George Bush, over 1 million innocent people killed in Iraq. Obama assassinated a U.S. citizen, Anwar al-Awlaki, in Yemen, and his son in a drone program. Assassinated a U.S. citizen. Assassinated Muammar Gaddafi. Helped al-Qaeda overthrow Libya. Put black people in cages. War crimes were committed up under him and Hillary. ISIS cutting off Christians' heads all throughout the Middle East. I mean, It's harder now to hold a president accountable. When the hell was you? Bill Clinton bombed Bosnia. Killed innocent people in Belgrade, murdered women and children, white phosphorus, bombed Sudan, illegally built, just bombed a medical facility, pretend like it was chemical weapons there. Men, women, and children were killed. Bill Clinton got a long laundry list of murder his goddamn self. When was he ever going to be held accountable? All of a sudden, though, you listen to this shoe shiner right here. After today, it's much harder to hold a U.S. president accountable. We ain't never seen y'all hold no president accountable. Y'all been playing games and you open up Pandora's box. I've been told y'all this is going to happen by fucking with Trump. Now it's all going up in flames and y'all done proved a U.S. president is bulletproof. All this other shit is window dressing. And it was all meant to rig the election. They knew none of this shit was going to hold up in court. None of it. Because anything you do on the throne of a presidency, incapacity of a president, you immune from. They never want a U.S. president to be convicted doing presidential shit. Rigging an election, that's presidential if you're trying to put yourself back in power. These people stupid. But today, they got a wake-up call.
In drawing a distinction, as Paula had talked about, between presumptive immunity and absolute immunity, how do you draw that distinction? Those questions have to go to a court now to be sorted out. And when you look at any series of acts that a president engages in, whether it's speaking to his attorney general to pursue prosecutions of opponents, or whether it might be even ginning up electors, could all be deemed official acts. That's confusing. It's going to require months, if not years of litigation to sort out. But the simple fact, as Justice Sotomayor speaks about a little bit.
That's not an official act. If I'm the U.S. president and I'm with my staff, I'm talking to governors, I'm talking to Republican operatives about how to help me get this election. They say rig it, I'm saying it's get it. Put me back in power. I'm doing this as the president. I'm not doing this as Donald Trump. I'm not saying, hey, help me get more Trump towers. That would be, he wouldn't have immunity if he did that as the president. I want more Trump towers. I want Trump golf courses as the president. They don't have him on record doing none of that shit. Everything they talk about this man did, he done as the U.S. president to help himself as the U.S. president. And they knew he was immune. They knew they weren't going to be able to convict him. Now they acting shocked.
A bit in strong terms, far stronger than I would use in her dissent, that it is just much harder, if not impossible, to hold a president criminally accountable now.
And we have a quote right here in the dissent that she wrote. saying when he uses his official powers in any way under the majority's reasoning, he now will be insulated from criminal prosecution. Orders the Navy SEALs Team 6 to assassinate a political rival, immune. Organizes a military coup to hold on to power, immune. Takes a bribe in exchange for a pardon, immune, 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 immune. Is that how you read the decision?
I respectfully dissent from that dissent.
Okay.
I don't think that's the case because I don't see any court, I don't see Justice Sotomayor saying that ordering a hit on your political opponent through SEAL Team 6 is an official act. I think she's right to raise the concern. I think this decision does open up a lot of unknowns, a lot of very weighty, important unknowns. But the key question here is it an official act or not? How could any judge or justice realistically say any of those things fall into the realm of official acts? So I think it's a little bit alarmist. I think it's a little bit hyperbolic what Justice Sotomayor is saying, but I understand the frustration. I understand the warning bell that she's sounding.
And we can chuckle about how absurd the hypothetical is, but the simple fact is, as a matter of common sense, of course, the president's not immune from that, but that now has to be a matter of litigation. No one can say for certainty, Justice Sotomayor can't, the majority can't say for certainty that necessarily it is an improper act to order a drone strike on an opponent. That's the challenge.
Attorney General Bill Barr was weighing in, who obviously has been highly critical of Donald Trump, though he said he's still voting for him in November. And he was saying, for example, receiving a bribe as president would be illegal, that you don't have the authority to receive a bribe. So saying that example he believed was too far-fetched there. The other interesting part of this and why the Trump team is viewing this is not only get it, they didn't get what Trump has been arguing that he had, which is full immunity, but they got more than what they argued for even in court, with the presumptive immunity decision, the kind of three buckets that they put them in. Right. But the other thing that Chief Justice John Roberts noted in this opinion today that could be very important to the case here in Washington is saying that the official acts, what it does count as an official act, cannot be used to bolster accusations related to unofficial acts. That's incredibly important because if they decide that what Trump said during the January 6th speech on the ellipse before the rioters broke into the Capitol on January 6th can't be used to overall prosecute his case and to speak to his mindset, that could really hamper the special counsel and how they're going to ultimately argue this case.
Which begs the question, I defer to the lawyers on this, if Jack Smith has to make a move here before things get adjudicated in court in any way, do we hear some revision of the indictment in some way, or is that not likely to be the case?
So this aspect of the ruling was really shocked me. The court, we knew it was not a big shock to see the court say, well, official acts, you're immune. But what I couldn't believe is they said, but you can't even use an official act as a piece of evidence. I mean, you have to tell a story as a prosecutor. For example, the Supreme Court said almost certainly Donald Trump's efforts to infiltrate DOJ, to weaponize DOJ in relation to the 2020 election, those are official acts. And not only can you not charge them, you can't even mention them as evidence. How do you tell the story? There's a big hole in the middle of the story now. And so Jack Smith has to decide either A, do I just release some of this stuff and say I'm not going to use it anymore as evidence, or B, does he fight for it with Judge Chutkan? But Amy Coney Barrett, actually, in her concurrence, is with me on, or I'm with her on this. Let me be respectful
She is with
of
you,
the office. That would never happen. But she says that it's too much, that you should still be able to introduce evidence, even if it's not charged.
Let's think of an even more down-to-earth example. The former president was prosecuted in New York City with some of the evidence in the trial being a conversation with Hope Hicks, a senior White House staffer. Now, one can make an argument that any conversation with senior White House staff counts as an official act of the presidency. So now, do prosecutors in New York have to reopen that prosecution? Certainly, and we've talked about it earlier today, certainly the defense attorneys there will move to
the Trump team
to overcome
without a doubt.
Yes.
But I just want to go back to the Sotomayor dissent for a moment, because your point that it may be a bit over the top and what have you, I think apart from the legal, it serves a political purpose here. It is, I think she probably put in that very strong language to sort of ring the alarm bell to Democrats to rally around this. This is why I also think you're seeing President Biden address the American people tonight on this case. Do I think this is going to have the same kind of rallying effect for Democrats that the Dobbs decision did of overturning 50 years precedent? No, I do not. Politically. But I do think that Democrats see an opportunity. I think Sotomayor was sort of painting a path for them here to rally around this notion of this totally unaccountable, not just any president, but specifically Donald Trump as a rallying cry for Democrats in this election season.
And speaking of politics, look, the solution is Congress, the political body of government, could, with the stroke of a pen, fix all of this. The simple fact, though, is that Congress is a polarized, broken institution that in practice is not going to.
Even though Senator Mitch McConnell, after Donald Trump's second impeachment, said this is actually where Donald Trump should be held accountable in the courts. Of course, now the Supreme Court has issued this ruling that is going to make that much more difficult.
All right, you guys came with a lot to say.
See what happened when you make up shit as you go along? They know a U.S. president ain't never been held accountable. They made it up to go after Trump, and today is the day they have to deal with their lies to the American people. They know the U.S. president been a dictator ever since any of us was born and never heard of. Whoever was dealt with, whoever was punished for their crimes as a U.S. president. Who? Nobody. Until they decided to hate Donald Trump, they just lost their sense. Lost all their senses. And like I said, the Supreme Court really saved their ass today. Biden, Obama, and Clinton. Because if they had took away immunity of the U.S. president, all of their ass was going to be going to jail for all of the crimes they have committed. And the Democrats done lost their mind. They don't understand this. They were saved today.
Oral arguments. I'm joined now by Rachel Maddow, host of The Rachel Maddow Show, whose award-winning podcast, Ultra, is now in its second season, and I've been gobbling up every episode of that. Rachel, just your thoughts. I remember talking to you the day of oral arguments when we did a special, and I think everyone's reaction to that was, whoa, are they going to do this?
Yeah.
We got our answer.
I remember talking to you about this, Chris, the day they chose to take it up. I mean, the decision to take it up itself was so gobsmacking. And I'm generally a glass half empty kind of person. I always see the cloud before I see the silver lining. But even when they took it up, I remember you and I talking about the radicalism of that decision in itself, because when the district court, the first level federal court, ruled on this issue, basically the rule was, duh, of course the president isn't immune. When the appeals court then looked at that and reviewed that decision, it was a unanimous, absolutely bulletproof decision from that appeals court, where the bottom line was essentially, duh, of course, no, a president can't be immune. So it was gobsmacking when the Supreme Court took it up. But I remember talking to you that day, and in my glass half empty kind of way, I thought, well, even under the worst case scenario, it's not like they're going to decide that he's immune. It's just outrageous that they've taken it up, because this will allow for months of delay and will effectively give him temporary immunity before the election. And once the election happens, if he wins, he makes all the prosecutions go away anyway. I really did not expect that they would do this.
They tried to rig the election through our court system. They should be ashamed of themselves. But since they done ran out of all their little tricks, and nothing has worked, and Donald Trump has got the last laugh in the end because he have the immunity he said he has, as long as everything he did was in the official capacity of a president. Now, if they catch him taking some bribes to help Trump Tower and to build more golf courses, that's totally different. And the U.S. Supreme Court said that. They can't help him for any bribes. Joe Biden need to worry about that. But guess what? They ain't charged that man with none of that. They charged him with crimes that they said he did, stealing the election to become president. Oh, I'll be damned. They said even that he has immunity as long as he was in his capacity of a president. They knew that.
Yes. And they, Donald Trump and his counsel asked for this 100% absolute immunity thing, which was insane. I would say they got 105% of what they were asking for. They got immunity from this court, despite some of the language in Justice Roberts's the ruling saying that there was some measure of humility here, some measure of restraint. The practical impact of what they have done is to give Trump immunity that even he and his counsel did not ask for. And given that the hypotheticals over the course of these arguments, as you rightly pointed out, included things like, can the president assassinate a rival? I think we have to look at the Supreme Court's.
They are not protecting Trump. Fuck no. They are protecting the U.S. presidency, the institution. That's what the Democrats done forced the Supreme Court hand to protect the institution, the presidency. They ain't this ain't about no damn Trump. Them people don't give a damn about him. He just got on the political scene a couple of years ago. They just met him. As far as he been handing him out money, but as far as being a political guy, come on. They don't know him like that. This is not about him. This is about keeping imperialism going on. This is about white supremacy. This is true of the U.S. This is about colonization. This real talk. More on the line. The Democrats have just lost their mind and want to attack the core of the U.S. power, and that's the seat of the throne, the U.S. presidency. They want to lock the president up. Then they know this wasn't just going to hurt Trump. This was going to tarnish the seat, the presidency. To now say the president could be arrested, shackled, chained, drugged to court, charged with all kind of crimes. Never in the history of humanity has that happened. So what did the Supreme Court do? They had to remind the Democrats, hey, all of that little bullshit y'all been doing was cool, but now you're doing way too much. No, the president's immune as long as he's sitting on the throne and he was doing shit in presidential capacity. He got the authority to wipe out countries. He got the authority to murder and mayhem and rob on behalf of the U.S. He got the authority, they just told you, to try to stay in power at all costs.
Affirmative answer to that. Yes, you can. With as much seriousness as it deserves. I mean, this is a death squad ruling. This is a ruling that says that as long as you can construe it as an official or quasi-official act, you can do absolutely anything, and never be held accountable, not only while you are president, but forever. And this is a president who has activated pro-Trump paramilitary groups that, wear insignia and T-shirts. And
as long as Bill Clinton and Hillary is alive, I don't ever want to hear about nobody killing political opponents. Are you kidding me? It's a joke. We know about the Clinton killers. These people are just out of their mind. Now they say, what if Trump tried to do what Bill Clinton been doing for decades?
Hold placards celebrating literally right-wing death squads, right? This is a president who has talked about absolutely using the Justice Department to go after his rivals. This explicitly immunizes anything the president wants to do through the Justice Department, but all but explicitly justifies anything the president wants to do, full stop, to anyone. And that is as serious as it gets.
I'm 100% with you on that. I want to stay on the Department of Justice thing, because obviously, and there's reason why in those in the hypothetical offered by a federal judge in the appeals court arguments about SEAL Team 6, and then talked about in SCOTUS, and then in the decision, why that has had such significance, right? But that is a hypothetical. It hasn't happened in American history. What has happened in American history is a president, Richard Nixon, using the Justice Department, the IRS, all kinds of faculty. I mean, he had the IRS audit his political enemies. He attempted to use the Justice Department to go after his political enemies.
Obama did too. Obama absolutely sicked the IRS on his political enemies. Obama, once again, assassinated Americans. Anwar al-Awlaki, a drone struck him and his son in Yemen because of their YouTube videos. They say he was a YouTube preacher. They say he was Al-Qaeda's YouTube preacher. What a damn joke. But it was a president being set. And even at that time, people talked about that. Barack Obama, not Trump. See, if it was Trump who had started that, oh, Lord, they'll be talking. They'd really be calling him a dictator. No, it was Obama. And he said, the president, I told, it's not about Anwar al-Awlaki. No, that people was praising it, Democrats. No, now they can do it to you if they say you're too radical or I'm too radical. The president has been set. The U.S. president can take any one of us out because we're a threat to the empire. American citizens, they already done it, and they done it under Obama. But these clowns forgot about that.
That's not a hypothetical. That's just American history. And coming out of that, and you're someone who's been a sort of historian of this period for a lot of reasons, there was a conclusion that Watergate was wrong and that what Nixon did to the federal government was wrong. And one of the readings of Roberts today is Watergate was not prosecutable, maybe, and what Nixon did as president, he probably was immune for, and too bad that John Roberts wasn't around in 1974.
They tricked him up out of office.
I mean, the executive, sort of the imperial executive idea, pioneered by Republican Justice Department officials like Ed Meese and brought to its sort of governing apex under Dick Cheney and the kinds of people who worked in Republican politics to approve the sorts of things that happened, particularly after 9/11 under the George W. Bush White House. Those have now been brought, bringing a bunch of people who were part of that cultural milieu in the legal world by bringing them into a supermajority in the Supreme Court. That has brought us to a place where a president has had his lawyers asked by a justice in open court, are you saying your guy can assassinate someone and he will have immunity for that? The answer was yes, and the court wrote it down. That answer is the logical,
It's a legal fact. It doesn't happen too many times. That's why a lot of our great leaders was assassinated. And a lot of that now is locked in confidential files. It's state secrets. They still won't release the classified documents on MLK or Malcolm X or JFK or Robert F. Kennedy or Fred Hampton. Hell no, because it was always green lighted by the U.S. president and the head of the FBI and the head of the CIA. They sat down, had those meetings, and green lighted those assassinations. So yes, in court, Trump and them was smart enough to tell the truth. Yes. What are they talking about? Yes, the American people need to know, yes, the president has the power to whack his political opponents. What are you talking about? This ain't nothing new. You ain't in Kansas no more, Dorothy. The Pandora's box is open because of you Democrats. Now the whole world is getting to understand what y'all mean when y'all always said the U.S. president is the most powerful man in the world. How can you be the most powerful man in the world if your ass can be arrested and be jailed? No, the powerful man in the world, you have no penalties. No one's bigger than you. You above the law. They know that's what they meant. They know that's what they meant, but they didn't like Trump. And now the whole game is being exposed.
Apex of where those things are, the nadir, I suppose, of where those things go over time. But to have that radicalism land when you have a potential next term of Donald Trump on the horizon if he wins in November, where he is saying exactly what he will do with this power, is quite a remarkable thing. Notice that nobody in reacting to today's ruling is saying, wow, how scary. What is Joe Biden going to do with this power? Right? Nobody is saying that. Nobody is worried that a president like Joe Biden is going to, abuse this in such a way that is going to bring about a de facto dictatorship. But because that is what Trump is explicitly promising for any next term that he wins in the White House, and this conservative...
Shut up, lady. 73% of the people, remember yesterday's poll, 3 out of 4 people said, was asked, should Joe Biden run for president? 73% of U.S. Americans say hell no. He's too old. He's mentally declined. Come on, man. Step down peacefully. But dictator Joe and his family say hell no. He ain't going nowhere. That's a dictator. That is what they. She said nobody's worried about. Yeah, we all worried about what the hell Joe Biden is trying to do. He can barely speak sentences, and he want to rule until he dead. He want to die with his hands gripping power. That is a damn dictator. No, just like an African warlord ruling to the end. Joe Biden ain't no different. A Democrat.
Court knows it, and a third of it was appointed by him. They're doing this in the full context, the full knowledge of the radicalism of what they're bringing down upon the country. And the only solution to this, the only way out of this, is to have non-criminals and non-authoritarian-minded would-be dictators win presidential elections. Yeah. That is the only way to fix this, because if you have somebody who is a criminal or is authoritarian-minded, when they get in there armed with this ruling, there is nothing they cannot do.
On that final point, the prospective implications of today's ruling are more profound in some ways and more unnerving than the retroactive ones, because I mean about the trial, and we're going to talk about this. What does it mean actually for the case that Jack Smith has, which is still alive, we should note, which I can't think they can cabin enough of this to bring that. We'll see and talk about it. A little unclear, but the symbolic meaning to me is almost as important as the legal meaning. For the reasons that you say, what it says to Trump, what it says to Republicans, the joke I made today was like John Roberts pulled down the American flag, turned it upside down, and like hoisted it back up on the Supreme Court. It felt to me like the opinion was like, we're with you on this. Over and above its findings, its holdings as a matter of constitutional law, its sort of communicative aspect.
Yeah. I mean, if the president, when Donald Trump, running for president in 2016, started leading crowds in that "lock her up" chant, as shocking as it was to most of the country, it was a transgressive thrill to Trump and his followers because they knew it sounded so wrong. But they enjoyed that transgressive thrill so much that it became policy. And we know that Trump, in fact, tried to get his Justice Department to bring improper politically motivated prosecutions against people while he was president, and indeed to improperly exclude him from federal investigation in the case that ultimately resulted in state court in his 34 felony convictions in New York. So we know that he is very, very facile with this. This is what he wants to do. This is what he thinks power should be. Who's my Roy Cohn, right? And now the Supreme Court has said without reservation and without limit, yeah, you can do that. We promise you explicitly in the ruling, in the language of the ruling, not even in a footnote, anything you say to your Justice Department is subject to immunity for you. And that is, I mean, it's the rule of law is in this country that the law is not used as an instrument of the ruler. The rule of law is supposed to constrain the ruler. And the Supreme Court just undid that, and it's binding, and it's now the way our country is structured. And the only way out of this, the only fix to this, there's no fix to this that involves impeaching Supreme Court justices. There's no fix to this that involves a new argument or a new case. The only fix to this is to put someone in the White House from here on out who will not abuse the absolutely tyrannical power they have just been legally granted.
You know what you just said? Now, they just made it clear the U.S. president can do whatever the hell he wants. I don't want to hear nothing out their mouth no more. We can't even complain about Joe Biden no more, y'all. We can't complain. He's a dictator. Oh, yes, he is a dictator. He's the Holy Roman Emperor. There's nothing we can do. The U.S. Supreme Court just said that. Cool. We agree. We accept. But the thing is, he finna get out of power, and Trump finna get back in power. Now, they trying to set the ground for everybody to understand. We got to keep Trump out of power. We got to give this dictatorship to another Democrat. That's what they're saying. We got to let somebody who's going to rule honestly and justly, as the king. These people are sick. They just scared the hell out of you to tell you go vote blue no matter who. Wait, lady. You just said the U.S. president could be a dictator now. This is bigger. This shit way bigger than Trump, man. I keep telling y'all that. This is about Obama. This is about Clinton. This is about Biden. This is about the U.S. president always been fucking war criminals. And these people never even thought about locking them up. Now let's listen to this house nigga. This coon been earning that $100 million Jeff Bezos got him. Every time I look on CNN, this house nigga, when he ain't shining shoes, because he definitely worked as a shoe shiner there, that boy is sitting in front of the CNN building, and any white man come in there, he immediately buffed them goddamn shoes to make. I don't give a fuck if a white man delivering a FedEx package. He gonna buff them shoes, get them right. Then that color gonna go on TV and give us some of that good coonish boule propaganda.
It's also scary because what is Trump gonna do if Trump gets elected and this idea that he can get away with even more stuff? That's really, really scary for the public because he already ran over every norm that he could. So it seems like, just look at this politically, not legally, politically, it's almost a thug in a way. Like you can do whatever you want, and the Supreme Court is probably going to let you get away with it. That is very frightening in this case, and so I'm very, very concerned.
That was Van Jones.
Always calling that coon to cry too. I'm waiting on some tears. This nigga, they usually break down crying. That's one thing they like. They like a black man to cry over here. Oh, he cry when he in fear. He cry when he happy. That's all this color do is cry. They looking at him right now. They got a box of tissues waiting on this color to start crying so they can, tell him, it's gonna be all right. It's gonna be all right. It's gonna be all right. You damn coon.
Do something that, quite frankly, I feel that the vast majority of the country already knew, that the president gets away with quite a bit. And that's not only including Donald Trump, and we'll get to those details in a moment, but in a 6-3 decision split by ideological lines, the Supreme Court has now ruled that Donald Trump is in fact immune from prosecutions for acts that he engages in as part of his official presidential duties. That means that he will have immunity protection for some of the acts he's indicted for under that federal election interference case, but not all. Cenk, thanks for watching. Our audience has helped build TYT into the media giant it is today. Together, we can accomplish AIM.
Yes, so obviously it applies to all presidents, including President Biden right now. So the scope of what he can do to Trump and others is amazing. We'll get into that in a second. And also, the most important part of the story is the one that people are not talking about enough. We're gonna explain the difference between official and unofficial, but what does quote unquote absolute immunity mean? We'll get back to that because that's critical.
So look, it is important to point out that the Supreme Court rejected Donald Trump's argument that everything he engaged in was covered under absolute immunity, or that the president enjoys absolute immunity. There are exceptions, and exceptions have to do with acts. The opinion from Chief Justice John Roberts declared that former presidents have absolute immunity from criminal prosecution over actions that fall within their core constitutional powers. There is no immunity, Roberts wrote, for unofficial acts, including the president engaging in campaigning efforts for his re-election campaign. That is not included as part of the official presidential duty. That is what the president is engaging in for his personal benefit in order to get reelected. He says that the president enjoys no immunity for his unofficial acts, and not everything the president does is official, Roberts wrote. The president is not above the law, but Congress may not criminalize the president's conduct in carrying out the responsibilities of the executive branch under the Constitution. And look, that distinction is incredibly important and significant as it pertains to Jack Smith's federal election interference case against Trump, because Trump's own lawyers during oral arguments even conceded that not all of Donald Trump's acts, which led to these indictments, are considered official presidential acts. Now, there was some dissent even among the conservative justices. I just want to give you that side note involving Justice Tony Barrett. So she wrote a concurrence saying that the court should not have ruled out allowing prosecutors to use evidence of a president's official acts, even when he could not be directly prosecuted for them. This is what she wrote. The Constitution does not require blinding juries to the circumstances surrounding conduct for which presidents can be held liable, Barrett wrote in an opinion that often seemed to be more in tension with the conservative majority than she let on. But this also means that immediately some of the central allegations that Jack Smith has leveled against Donald Trump will be knocked out, including claims that he attempted to weaponize his Justice Department to concoct or amplify false claims of voter fraud. Now, what happens next? Well, according to the Supreme Court's decision, US District Judge Tanya Chutkan must now look through the allegations made against Donald Trump by Jack Smith and determine which acts fall under official duties and which acts fall under unofficial duties. Okay, but even after she makes that decision, understand that it's not necessarily all is said and done, because there could be more of a fight in regard to whatever her decisions are here. And you're about to hear Ellie Honig explain that in the next clip.
The court says several times, whatever the district court finds can be appealed before trial. Jack Smith had made an argument of, well, maybe the district judge, the trial judge can work it out and send it to the jury. And then the jury can separate official from unofficial acts. Several times in this opinion, the Supreme Court, the majority says explicitly, whatever the judge decides about what's official or unofficial, what's immune or not immune, that can be appealed back up. 0% chance that happens before November.
So Honig there is also trying to answer the question of whether or not this trial will take place prior to the election simultaneously. And so he's making clear that it is very unlikely, because the decisions that Judge Chutkan makes in regard to what is and isn't considered official acts by the president or former president could be appealed. And those appeals obviously will lead to more delays in this case. Cenk.
Yeah, so first let's discuss the Trump implications and then the much broader and more dangerous implications for the country. So number one, on Honig, I actually disagreed with him on some of the stuff he said later in that segment, but on that portion, he's definitely correct. No chance this gets resolved before the election. So if Trump wins and if Biden stays in the race, as we'll talk about later in the show, he's pretty much guaranteed a victory. So it'll be totally wiped away, totally scot-free. That's absolutely clear. And the Supreme Court justices very, very clearly dragged their heels. At every moment that they could delay, they delayed. And so this is the very last time that they could have given this. And then they put in a couple of provisions that also made Chutkan deciding later. They could have said she could start deciding right now, but they said, no, you can't start deciding until August. So are they trying to protect Trump from this particular prosecution? Definitely, no question about it, okay? So now when it gets to the broader issue, that's where the real danger comes into play. Okay, so look, on the Trump prosecutions, they were massively important, but they're never going to happen because either he's going to win the election and he wipes it right, or he loses. And let's keep it real.
That's why That's why they told you, well, we can't prosecute him because he's a senile old, good intentioned old man, you know. But his mental capacity wasn't good enough to put him on the stand. That's what they said. They're just like, okay. But they protecting the presidency. It ain't about Biden, it ain't about Trump, it ain't about Obama. It's about the imperial presidency of the United States, man. And the sun that never set on the U.S. empire. The Democrats done went too far. They put too much smut on the U.S. presidency, man.
The Democrats never meant it. If he gets convicted, they're gonna let him go. There's no way he's gonna go to a federal penitentiary for breaking these laws. But anyway, so the important part is, what is the precedent? Now, everybody's focusing on official versus unofficial acts, and that's where I think Honig was wrong in other parts of his opinions on CNN. Because Anna, he talked about the example that Sotomayor used in her dissent, just using SEAL Team 6 to murder someone. He's like, that's preposterous. That can't happen. That's an unofficial act.
Yeah, he's wrong about that. I agree that he's wrong in that analysis. Can we actually go to that video? Because we have it. I want the audience to see that moment and then we'll discuss what we think. Let's take a look.
Sotomayor's, where she says, the majority pays lip service to this idea that the president is not above the law, and then in effect says that for certain official acts, the president is in fact above the law. It's how do you sort out what this actually means?
If the president decides that his rival is a corrupt person and he orders the military or orders someone to assassinate him, is that within his official acts that for which he can get immunity?
It would depend on the hypothetical, but we can see that could well be an official act.
That was a stunning moment in April. Did the court just say, yeah, you can assassinate a political rival?
No, I don't think they did. That's a ridiculous answer by Donald Trump's team, a dangerous and reckless answer.
Have they ever heard of Dr. King? I mean, they act like they never heard of Dr. King before. That's what's so disgusting. They know they put the hit on Dr. King and Malcolm and Fred Hampton, JFK, RFK. These are all political opponents. These are all political opponents. Disgusting that they're pretending like, oh, we're shocked. This is CNN is a joke. What fake news? We're shocked that they actually say that. Yes, y'all done forced the truth to the light now. Now the whole world knows.
That that you disagree, and I disagree with him as well, that this ruling does indicate that if the president engages in criminality as part of his official presidential duties, well, then he's free from prosecution.
Yeah, this has already happened. So I'm gonna give you a case that proves I'm 100% wrong. But on top of that, he's saying something ridiculous. And normally I like Honig's analysis. I think he is relatively unbiased. So because the president doesn't go and say, this is now an unofficial act. When I normally use Navy SEAL Team 6, it is an official act. But this one is for opponents and hence unofficial. He's not gonna say that, right? He's gonna say, what do you mean? Using the military is part of my, as Chief Justice Roberts put it, core constitutional powers.
It's always going to be labeled that the political opponent is a threat to national security. All that. And that's why they say they can't release any classified information on Malcolm, on Martin, Fred Hampton, RFK, Robert F. K. They always say it's a threat to national security to release the information.
It doesn't get any more core constitutional power than the president using the military.
Right.
So then you're going to get into boundaries. But the case says you are not allowed to get into boundaries. So then how do we know if it was an official or unofficial act when we can't even find out? So let me give you two quotes from the case that prove it. One is actually sent in by one of our members just now. I love how smart our members are. Okay, so this is Eclectic Miscellanea. You guys hit the link below to become a TYT member, tyt.com/team, tyt.com/team. So Eclectic wrote in, it's not just official acts, it's anything the president claims they did as part of their job. We can't even question it. We just have to take their word that they thought it was an official act. Quote from the ruling, quote, in dividing official from unofficial conduct, courts may not inquire into the president's motives. Well, if you can't inquire into the president's motives or any reason why he did it, how do you know if it's an official or unofficial act? Here, let me read you another quote from the ruling, which is just over the top, okay? So this is in regards to what they are allowed to do, not allowed to do. Quote from Roberts, Trump is absolutely immune from prosecution for the alleged conduct involving his discussions with Justice Department officials. So absolutely immune for what he discusses with the Justice Department in relation to the certification of the election. Okay, well, if that's the case, we can't even inquire into what it is that he asked the Justice Department. But wait a minute, if he asked the Justice Department, hey, are you guys sure that we lost? That's perfectly fine. That's arguably within his official duties. And if you told me that's all Trump did, I'd be like, oh, not guilty. That's the most normal thing in the world, right? But what if he tells his Justice Department, I don't care if I won or lost, go find me some votes. That is arguably what he did, but you'd have to adjudicate that, but you can't adjudicate it anymore because they said you're not even allowed to look into it, quote, absolute immunity. But what if he said to the Justice Department, hey, you know what, I lost, but if we do a fake prosecution of Joe Biden, it'll seem like I won and we'll be able to put him in prison and then I'll just retain power. Quote, absolute immunity, you're not even allowed to ask about it. Well, then you can order the Justice Department to do anything.
What I'm wondering is if they at all in their decision make a distinction between the president acting out of his own personal interest for himself versus official presidential acts that have to do with the governance of the country.
No, that's why a lot of legal experts are pulling their hair out going, how do we know when it's official or unofficial? Right? So for example, official is presidential duties, unofficial is candidate duties. But how do you know if he did candidate duties or presidential duties if you're not allowed to ask, right? And absolute immunity is not unclear. And that is the direct quote that I just read you guys from the Supreme Court's decision. So this thing is totally screwed. Now, let me give you the example, Anna, you and I have talked about it many times, of something that already happened, could have led to a prosecution of a president. And before you decide whether you like this or don't like this, hold on and find out which president and what they did. Right? Obama killed an American citizen with a drone strike.
With no due process.
With no due process and did not ask the courts. And his attorney general said that due process is not necessarily judicial process. So we never had to ask any courts. The attorney general and the president.
The reason that was so disgusting is because at the same time, they start talking about black identity extremists. You see why at the same time they're killing Anwar al-Awlaki in Yemen, American citizen and his son, American citizen just went to, that's like if I go to Mali or Niger or Burkina Faso and do my CultfiggaTvNews program from Mali, Burkina Faso or Mali, Burkina Faso or Niger, they saying, hold on, he messing up our imperial program. He over there YouTubing live, uniting them people. That's anti-American. They can drone strike me. Obama said the president, you know, that was a problem. The National Defense Authorization Act, Obama put into place, they can snatch you off the street. They don't have to tell your family where you went. They can pretend like rival gangs or anybody kidnap you. They can pretend like the cartels kidnap you. Yes, it's been Guantanamo Bay the whole time. They don't have to tell your people that. They can pretend like you're just missing. That was the law. Obama put that into play. The imperial president. And nobody said a mumbling motherfucking word when he was doing all that shit. No revolutionary speaking, but Congressional black coons, they was going along with it the whole time. The whole time the FBI was targeting so-called black identity extremists. You see, turning up the heat on revolutionaries and putting it in a case law that they can kill an American if you are deemed anti-American and you are so-called preaching radical messages against the American empire. Obama.
They decided within their official duties to unilaterally execute an American citizen abroad, and they did. And so now I think they both should have been prosecuted for that. Of course, they never were because they're in the elites, right? But now that's official, like you can't even ask. So now if they can kill Anwar al-Awlaki, which they alleged was a terrorist, but by the way, never proved, never even showed any evidence that he was a terrorist. They said he did mean and terrible things. He did.
The man just preached down with empire on YouTube. Man was a YouTube sensation who hung out in Yemen, who they say Al-Qaeda used to listen to. The man was not Al-Qaeda fucking preacher. That was just the boogeyman tag. But his 14-year-old American son was with him too. Obama killed him too. And everybody was looking at that like, wait a minute, you killed the American citizen who you don't like his message on the internet? But if Trump would have did that, they'd be talking about dictator. With Obama, they didn't say a goddamn word.
That doesn't mean he launched any bombs or anything like that. So if they can kill that US citizen and we're not allowed to ask, are we allowed to ask when they kill another US citizen abroad? And they go, me and the Attorney General talked it over. We're done with this. Absolute immunity. And okay, that was abroad. What's to stop them from doing it at home? Well, you say, well, that's not an official. How do you know it's not an official?
Have you ever heard of Malcolm? Have you ever heard of Fred Hampton? Huh? Have you ever heard of Khalid Muhammad? He didn't die of no brain aneurysm. Long live Khalid. Come on, Malcolm, MLK. They've been killing our leaders. The imperial president going along with all that shit. JFK held his nose there. He went along with all the murders. Then they bumped him off. Robert F. Kennedy was going along with all the murders. Then they bumped him off. That's serious motherfucking business. Come on, they know exactly what happened to our people, authorized by the United States government. Now they want to pretend like, oh, do you know what the president would do now? Oh, man, please. Who y'all fooling? Who y'all trying to pretend? Trying to trick?
Duty. He says it's an official duty and you're not allowed to ask. And so this is insanity. If it is as Justice Sotomayor is explaining in the dissent, and it looks like based on the wording it is, it's kind of a democracy ending case. So, because then the president can really call anything an official duty. You're not allowed to ask. He can do whatever the hell he wants. And look, the Republicans have a giant advantage at it because
democracy. If we don't vote blue, then it's the end of our democracy. See, this is a con. This is I mean, now he wants to say the only way you can save democracy is to keep the Democrats in power. And he just preached about what Obama did. You see the scam? You just told us Obama killed some Americans. You wanted him arrested. But now we got to keep the Democrats in power. Disgusting scam, man.
They know Joe Biden's got a ton of problems. And yeah, Obama did this to a Muslim American who hasn't been in the country in a while and was advocating for Al Qaeda, at least through his sermons, right? That guy's gonna get killed every time, and they're not gonna give him a damn, and they're not gonna follow the law, and no one's gonna hold them to account. We already know that, right? But generally speaking, Democrats are not going to go lock up Republicans. I know Republicans think they are, right? And I know they think that it's totally unfair that, just because Trump stole national secrets and just because he tried a coup.
He said that Democrats not going to go lock up Republicans. And they locked up everybody around Trump, even the generals, like all his lawyers. They done his lawyers like they done Suge Knight lawyers. Nigga, they locked up Suge Knight lawyers. They done it to Trump lawyers. Nigga, no more. But Trump, lawyers had immunity, client lawyer privilege. They threw that out, arrested his lawyers. Tell me everything Trump said to you. They're like, wow, these people disgusting. Yeah, they did all of that. But Democrats will not. Then they will put on the screen everybody arrested around Trump and laugh. But he say Democrats will not arrest their political opponents. Are you kidding me? Trump talked about lock them up. The Democrats taught his ass a lesson about talking about doing something you don't plan on doing. Now he won't pay back because they did it to him.
Blah, blah, blah. But generally, Democrats don't abuse this stuff. Look at what they're investigating under Biden. Democratic Senator Bob Menendez, Democratic Congressman Cuellar in Texas, etc. Right?
They just started Go Big Bob. The Republicans forced their hand. They had to feed the Republicans something to protect Joe Biden. So you gave them a big fish. Joe Biden's partner on the Senate all these years, Go Big Bob. Joe Biden is no better than Go Brick Bob. He's been taking way more bribes than Go Brick Bob. But Joe Biden done hit it big. He became the president, the imperial president. The Supreme Court just ruled Joe Biden will never be prosecuted for his crimes unless they catch him with bribery. Remember, that's the one thing they say. If he was enriching himself on behalf of the Biden crime family, which the Republicans are trying to prove, you don't have immunity for that. Remember, if Trump was enriching himself on behalf of the Trump towers and shit, it wouldn't be able to help him. But that's not the case. So Biden and his family might still be on the hook for trying to enrich themselves.
But Republicans and Trump, they're saying it nonstop. Later in the show, we're talking about Steve Bannon.
Right.
He's like, oh, we're going to go after all of our political opponents and we're going to use the Justice Department. So the Republicans know the Democrats aren't going to prosecute us with this stuff, but we could abuse the living crap out of it, and there's nothing they can do.
But the Democrats are prosecuting Donald Trump in 4 separate cases.
But you can't.
And look, you can agree with those prosecutions because he did mishandle classified documents and he did try to implement fake electors 100%. You know, the only
the classified document thing. Joe Biden had classified documents going back to his days as a senator, which is illegal. You can't have classified documents as a senator. You're supposed to read them in a private skiff, meaning Joe Biden stuck them down his pants, knew what he was doing, and walked out of there with classified documents. He was selling information. He was taking bribes, all kind of BS. Joe Biden, he had to return some. Obama had to return some. Bush, all of them had classified documents. But it's Trump who they say, oh, he must have been doing something nefarious. You see, they had their hard on for Trump that they blew up and blew up what all presidents been doing this whole time and put spotlight onto the imperial president. Now everybody know the president is a fucking dictator that can do whatever he wants. And they've been telling you that.
Case that actually went all the way through was Alvin Bragg's case alleging, that Donald Trump falsified business documents in order to cover up the hush money payments to Stormy Daniels.
Now, that was another crazy thing that they did that made business people not want to be in New York. Why? Because Trump was doing what all tycoons and business people do in New York: inflate their wealth. Rich whites inflate their wealth. It's up to the banks. It's up to the people who come to look at the property to say, if Trump say, hey, this thing worth 500 million, they supposed to say, hell no, man, this is a $30 million property. But if Trump say this thing worth 500 million and they say, okay, yeah, it's worth 500 million, then he take out a loan, hey, that's on them. Well, I said it's worth 500 million. Why are they giving me that? But guess what? That's what all the rich white guys was doing. Wink, wink. Well, it's free money. Because guess what? You pay back the loan. But you just got all that free money for no reason. You inflated your property value. He wasn't the only person doing it. So they blew that up in New York. People like, God damn, man, why y'all going after Trump? We all been doing that. Democrats with their BS.
And that case, unfortunately, is, in my opinion, was the pettiest one out of all of them.
But
and that's the one that actually went through. And so the public, generally speaking, does see it as a politically motivated prosecution against Donald Trump.
So, but Anna, so that's a great point, and that's important to distinguish. Okay, so you're right that a lot of the public, not all the public by a long shot, but a lot of the public does see it as political. And we talked about how the timing we think is political, and that's a giant problem, right? But they didn't do any of that under the cover of night. They didn't say, hey, I'm talking to Biden, pulls aside Merrick Garland, let's do this, let's do that. They said they did it all above board. You can ask them any questions you want from it. And if they did anything wrong, Joe Biden was not immune. If he illegally told that prosecutors to go after Donald Trump, in the past, he was definitely not immune. Actually, ironically, the deep state, the guys who believe in the deep state should be panicking right now, because in their minds, Joe Biden is constantly illegally telling the Justice Department to prosecute Trump and MAGA, right? Well, now he has immunity to do it, absolute immunity.
That's a good point.
So how did that help you?
He got absolute immunity.
That's a good point.
The imperial president.
So yeah, I mean, I think ultimately we'll see how the judge, Tanya Chutkan, decides which allegations against Donald Trump fall under official acts and which fall under unofficial acts, and then it will inevitably be appealed by Trump's legal team. And so the question is, how do those, determinations get adjudicated finally after they're appealed.
So that leads to the last two things. One is, we know already based on the Roberts opinion that I just read you, that they will not be able to ask the Justice Department, so in other words, hey, Bob Barr or Bill Barr, wait.
Yeah, Bill Barr.
Bill Barr, sorry, Bob Barr is a different person. Bill Barr, hey, did Trump tell you to go outside of the bounds of the law in looking into whether the election was quote unquote stolen or finding votes that did not exist? Robert says you're not
outside what law? Don't they see the people? There is no outside of the law for a U.S. president, and Trump knew that the whole time. But they just didn't want him to be telling the world that there is no outside of the law for a U.S. president. We're finding that out now. There's no outside of the law. So when Trump telling them, "Hey, I need you to do this or that," and my capacity as the U.S. president, he's not going outside of the law. See, the U.S. Supreme Court just ruled on that. The U.S. president is an imperial president. He can't be prosecuted for anything he does in the official capacity as a president. Now that, right, the whole world was wondering why the U.S. get away with maiming and murder and killing and stealing all over the world, because they do it on behalf of the U.S. corporation. They do it on behalf of big business inside the U.S. The U.S. president is administrator of this big business, and the Supreme Court just blew the cover on all of that. There is no prosecution for a U.S. motherfucking president for nothing they're doing to the goddamn world.
Not allowed to ask him. He has absolute immunity. He could have asked for anything he wanted, presumably including cheating, and you're just not allowed to ask. So that part of the case is already over. And Amy Coney Barrett dissented in part, and her dissent is relevant because she joins the majority with all 6 conservatives overall. But in one part, she says, I dissent on this. Roberts says you're not even allowed to present evidence. You're not allowed to seek or present evidence once there's an adjudication that it's an official act, okay? So she said, well, then you could never get evidence to prove that it was not an official act. So then by definition, the president can do anything. And that's a conservative justice saying that.
The president can do anything, man. The president can do anything. The president been doing it. The president has been doing anything, man. These people think we crazy. And that's so now we know that Sleepy Joe, somebody's using his imperial authority, the small hats, to do whatever the fuck they want and using his immunity. Joe Biden actually don't know what the hell going on in his name right now. We know that's not a game now. He's not playing crazy like the head of the Genovese family who's walking around in his pajamas. Nah, Joe Biden is really out of his mind when he's walking around in his goddamn pajamas.
All right, President Biden's not so Oscar-worthy performance at last Thursday's debate reportedly has Hollywood donors in a panic. According to the trade publication Variety, they are threatening to withhold funding from all Democrat candidates unless Joe drops out. Actor Dennis Quaid endorsed Donald Trump, and he joins us right now with coffee in hand. Dennis, good morning to you.
The funding on Sleepy Joe.
Hey, how are you, Steve?
I'm doing okay.
Good to see you.
So what do you make of these Democrats? You know, the party right now is in crisis because they're going, after Thursday, he could actually leave. And some of the rich ones are going, no more money.
Well, it's they're in a quandary about that because what do they do with the money that they've already received if he drops out? He's going to give that. People gave that money to Biden and voted for Biden, and if he drops out, it's kind of disenfranchising millions and millions of people who voted for him.
Absolutely. All right, I've got a feeling you know a lot about the presidency because you've got a brand new movie about Ronald Reagan that is coming out this summer. And I know you did a lot of research into it. Before we discuss, take a look. Here's Dennis Quaid as the Gipper talking about the Soviet Union.
You learned how to read the currents. Not just the ones on the surface, but also the ones deep underneath the water. I am about to start the biggest war of this century, and I'm not going to fire a single shot.
Dennis, you got the look down. How'd that feel?
Well, Penelope Ann Miller plays Nancy, and she made it real easy for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, you have a lot of the same facial characteristics. I understand this is one of those movies that you actually started to film during COVID, and you had
to be sharing their goddamn self to bring up Ronald Reagan. And why? Because everybody know he was a corpse. His last term in office, he could barely function properly. And Nancy Reagan was running the White House. Look it up. And what's making it so crazy, just like Jill Biden running the White House, that's how Nancy Reagan really was running the White House. She was the head because she was close to her husband. Anybody can look it up. She used to bring in astrologers to say when Ronald Reagan was going to go have meetings. If the astrologer said it wasn't a good day, Ronald Reagan ass wasn't coming outside. After George Bush Sr., that's who did it, tried to kill Ronald Reagan to get to be the president. Ronald Reagan just so happened to survive, you know. She didn't trust him no more. But this clown played Ronald Reagan. Well, I bet you didn't put none of that shit in the movie.
to shut down a couple of times, and then there was an actor's strike. So against all odds, this movie finally completed, and it's going to come out on August 30th.
Yeah, we were one of the first movies to shoot during COVID, and 2 weeks in, somebody on the crew got it. We had to shut down for a month, and then during the assassination scene, which was down in the basement of a clinic with about 60 extras, just about everybody got COVID and had to stop and again, but we persevered, and I think we made a really good film. I think we did, and I think people, you get to go behind the scenes like a fly on the wall of all these scenes that happen, in real life during his term and during his life, and see what it was like.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So the tickets go on sale this 4th of July on Thursday, and the movie comes out August 30th. Dennis, congratulations. By the way, if you
the group sales are on right now, Steve,
Okay.
but the individual sales of the movie comes out August 30th, like you said, and
nobody want to see no just thinking movies. You supposed to be letting us know how Hollywood was cutting off Joe Biden. I didn't know you from talking about the Gipper movie. Your ass ain't telling the truth no way.
Trying to flip the script after Joe Biden's debate disaster. Nancy Pelosi now claims that it's Donald Trump who needs his brain checked.
There are healthcare professionals who think that Trump has dementia.
The choice is one terribly bad night versus a decade of destruction to our core beliefs, a man slowed down by a cold versus a man with a cold, vile, and merciless heart. Why aren't there calls for Trump to drop out?
It's literally you go to a dinner and your choices are steak or a pile of poo.
It really is amazing, Joey, that, you've got Nancy Pelosi calling for Donald Trump to have his head examined. I mean, I'm not sure if we shouldn't start with Nancy.
With all due respect, mostly ladies that were on there talking, ladies, he won 2 championships, and neither of them were seniors. And tell me how he has dementia if he can win 2 golf championships, or at least that's what he told us. Is this some form of gaslighting? It's, don't spit in my face and tell me it's raining. I'm going to tell you that I saw that Joe Biden probably has something going on, and you're going to spin it back to me. No one buys that. They lose credibility for it. I want them to keep saying those things. I just want to hear it all the way to November.
Yeah, it's interesting. And Dana, you've got Jonathan Karl, Jon Stewart, Van Jones, Kate Bedington, Chuck Todd, David Axelrod, John King, Sarah Haynes. That night, they all said, this man doesn't belong in this race.
I was just thinking, who I quoted on Thursday night after the debate was Joy Reid.
Yeah.
I said, I'm watching her, her Twitter, or people saying, like she said, I'm like, oh, she just said she has never seen anything like it, that universally everybody who was texting her was that this is a disaster and he has to pull out.
I remember.
So I guess by the next morning. And also on Mika, do you remember when Joe tripped on the sandbag at the Air Force Academy at the graduation? Do you guys remember what Mika Brzezinski said at the time? She blamed the staff.
The advance team.
She said, it is your job to protect him from this.
Right.
Right. So I guess that's just going to keep coming up. And I also noticed that Joe wasn't on today, and he was rude to her last week. And I just wonder what he ended up having to do. The other thing is that you know that the White House communications team and the Biden campaign team were working overtime to try to coordinate all the because you had Bill Clinton put out a statement around 5 o'clock. It was like this long and it was like trying to explain. And then you had the humble brag from Barack Obama. He's like, yeah, but, everyone has bad debate nights just like me, as if anything he ever did. It was this close to a political earthquake that they've had. I think that when the stories of all of this are written on November 6th, after a possible loss, then we'll all really know what happened. But right now, it looks like the Democrats are just going to close ranks and keep quiet unless we call on Kevin.
Kevin, I will call on you next. They keep saying that Donald Trump lied, he lied, and Joe just had a cold. But the truth is, Joe lied, and he said no one died under his watch when there were 13 plus 3 in Jordan. He said the Border Patrol endorsed him. That's an absolute lie. They said we never have and we never will. And of course, he beat Medicare, which I think is a lie too. But
yeah, those are two of my least favorite slip-ups from the debate on Thursday night. I think he was trying to say that the Border Patrol endorsed his bipartisan plan and obviously got tripped up on Medicare.
Really? Is that what he was thinking?
Yeah,
How
I think so, because he was talking about his plan and asylum and stuff like that.
That makes sense.
But we've got 120 some odd days of this back and forth, and we're going to see a lot more of this between an 81-year-old and a 78-year-old. To Joey's point, I'd love to see this just battled out on the golf course. Let's just, whoever wins that tournament can be the next commander in chief, because that's going to be a lot more fun than these kind of attacks on mental acuity and slippages and stuff like that.
Do you not think there's an issue there with Joe?
I think he's great between 10 and 4, just like I am.
Are you comfortable with that?
100%.
Okay, Greg, hit him.
Well, you know what? I'm with Mika. Joe just had one bad night. So did the Titanic and OJ. What was he like all good before that, and it just suddenly happened? It's. I think that they could spin it. The Democratic Party is a party of firsts. They had the first Black president, first female Black VP, first trans health secretary. Now we could have the first president with dementia. It's time. I think it's time. Maybe that put the spin on it. Mika does not do herself any favors. When you watch that, it's all emotional. It's all emotional. When we talk about this, Kevin, you're a Democrat. You're scanning this just objectively. We're not raising our voices. We're just looking at this. We're going, okay, this guy objectively, in my opinion, has dementia. He shouldn't be president. I'm not screaming. I'm a little pissed off at the media. I'm pissed off at the Democrats for lying, but I'm not shaking. And you watch her and you're going like, okay, this is not about America. She should be, she has a show in the morning. She talks to Americans. She should be talking for them and not, it's about her feelings. And you could see that. And I'm like going, okay, this is wrong. Trump has broken so many people and she's one of them. And it is time for her to get some help. Talk to somebody who's got some experience to get this off. I know that Trump said mean things about her, but it was, whatever. She's got to let go because she's willing to put a man who's physically and mentally incapacitated into the office because she's so emotionally broken by Trump. It's not a good look for Mika. I feel bad for Joe. He's on some couch somewhere. Maybe he's at the Best Western.
Yeah, why aren't they mad at the Democrats for putting him? If they think he's an existential threat, well, isn't having a president that's only available to us between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m.
One of the things isn't real. It's the hoax.
You got to be a happy warrior too.
Yeah, right.
Democrats are panicking, and I think what they saw on Thursday night, we got a lot of questions, Stuart.
Did Joe Biden have a bad night, in my opinion? Yes, he absolutely did. Do we have concerns, and do we wish that Joe Biden did better yesterday? Yes. Why? Because we put people over politics, and we know what's at stake in this country, and we know that this would be devastating to the country and to the world if there is another Donald Trump president.
What do you mean? I am not part of the drama of this town that immediately demands because somebody had a bad night, we're in a crisis.
No, we're doomed. This is the best we got. The fact that they're pushing such old candidates forward and saying this is the best we have.
I hear you, brother. And wait till you hear some of the loudest voices urging Biden to stay in the presidential race despite his horrible debate performance last week. And Democrats, meaning the Democratic Party, are even weighing an early formal nomination of Biden in order to squash any efforts to swap him out with a different candidate. We're gonna get to more on that in just a moment, and it is a spicy story to say the least. Hold on for that. But first, let's talk about the meeting that occurred over the weekend between Joe Biden and his family members. They were in Camp David, and they have decided to blame everyone else for Biden's failure while urging Biden to remain in the race. They argue that Biden was not prepared to pivot more to go on the attack. They're alleging that he was forced to spend more time defending his record rather than outlining his vision for the future. So in that regard, they're blaming the debate moderators. You've just been president for several years. I think you should expect to have to defend your record, but okay. And they also argue that he was overworked and not well rested. And these ridiculous talking points obviously reached the Democratic leadership in Congress. In fact, here's an example from James Clyburn.
Yes, it was a bad performance. I've been around these things. I've been a part of debate preparation before, and I know what when I see what I call preparation overload. And that's exactly what was going on the other night. I saw Joe Biden grabbing for words and phrases and even numbers that he was loaded up with. The next day, he gets to North Carolina, he's freewheeling, and he captivated the audience.
I believe on Friday in North Carolina, he had a teleprompter.
Joe Biden has a history of stuttering. He did that as a child. All of us know how stutterers operate. I went to school with one. So when you have trouble getting out a word, that is what comes from stuttering. But when he expressed opinions, he was on the money with the opinions. He may not have gotten the word out, but the thoughts were great.
No, I mean, I'm sorry. I'm no longer going to be a registered Democrat. I'm going to re-register as an independent because I'm not going to just whole cloth support a party that feels the need to insult voters like that.
Yeah,
that was insulting and disrespectful to say the least, okay? Thanks for watching. Our audience has helped build TYT into the media giant it is today. Together, we can accomplish anything. Support our work.
Basically pre-announcing, we are going to gaslight you, and now watch us do it. Did you hear that last comment? He said, yeah, he didn't get the words out, but he had the thoughts right.
No.
Wait, hold on. How would you know? If he didn't get the words out, how do you know which thoughts were in his head?
That's crazy.
Do you understand the level of absurdity we're dealing with here? So the whole country saw Joe Biden melt on that debate stage.
Correct.
And these idiots are going out there and going, no, he didn't. No, don't believe you're lying to us. Now, I know why they're doing it. Because a third of the country will believe anything a Democratic leader says.
Just like a third of the country will believe anything the Trump camp says.
100%.
This is blue MAGA through and through. Let's keep it real.
No, now I'm positive there's blue MAGA, and I'm deeply, deeply disappointed. But you can say, hey, Cenk, you know what? You're naive. Of course, Democrats are just as deluded as Republicans, but it didn't seem like it. Republicans have staked their claim to a number of things that are preposterously untrue. But now the Democrats have joined them, saying that Biden, it was his staff. How did his staff make him 81? How did his staff make him forget everything he was saying?
They're throwing Anita Dunn. They're throwing Anita Dunn under the bus. That's the senior advisor who frequently has the president's ear. Dunn's husband is also being thrown under the bus. That's Bob Bauer, the president's attorney who played Trump in the rehearsals for the debate. Ron Klain, the former chief of staff who ran point on the debate prep and previous cycles sessions.
Yeah.
It's just they're throwing everyone else under the bus, while simultaneously gaslighting the American people into thinking that we didn't all see what we all saw with our own two eyes. We didn't hear what we all heard with our own two ears. And look, I have my issues with Jake Tapper, but here he is calling a spade, and I have a lot of respect for anyone in the media who's willing to tell the truth. Let's watch.
Biden campaign chair Jen O'Malley Dillon holding a call with party leaders earlier today, telling them this too shall pass. There is a discernible pattern of Democratic officials seemingly trying to convince you, the public, to not believe what you saw and what you heard with your eyes and with your ears on Thursday night. Democratic officials have tried to spin this in many ways. They said President Biden just had a cold. They said it was just one off night, akin to when President Obama in 2012 was rusty and seemed a little huffy. But behind the scenes, make no mistake, most Democratic officials witnessed the same shocking spectacle that you did.
The Democratic Party has made a clear decision here. And that clear decision is to protect the selfishness and the ego of Joe Biden and his family members, clearly, who are urging him to stay in the race, over the best interests of the future of the country, or over the best interests of Democratic voters who overwhelmingly believe that Biden should not be running for re-election right now.
Yeah, so let me give you a George Orwell quote, and then I'm gonna back it up with overwhelming evidence. So he wrote in 1984, "The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command." Now you tell me that's not exactly what's happening here. Orwell was an unmitigated genius. That is exactly right. So now let's talk about who they is, because there's one decision maker here. NBC News, New York Times, Axios, all saying who the top decision maker is, and it's Jill Biden. So Dr. Jill Biden has decided that she is staying in the race. So Joe will have to stay with her, okay? And so this is not hyperbole, guys. And it's all of the major outlets reporting this. So now when, like for example, Anita Dunn, Ron Klain, et cetera, or whether you like them or not, agree with them or not, and Bob Bauer as well, like legendary Democratic staffers. And for that, you could hate them. Okay, they have been involved in victories, they've been involved in defeats, and they are beloved in Washington, okay? Now, all of a sudden, after a career where you told us that they were infallible, whenever I questioned Anita Dunn, people were like, how dare you? I've literally been kicked out of rooms in Washington for questioning Anita Dunn.
Yep.
But now all of a sudden, she's under a bus.
Under a bus, right?
Okay.
Because precious Biden, we got to protect his feelings. We have to protect his ego, and he and his family insist on continuing with this sham presidential run. And by the way, just to give you guys the receipts, as reported by Politico, let's go to graphic 2 here. First Lady Jill Biden and his son Hunter Biden were the loudest voices urging the president to stay in the 2024 contest.
I don't want to go to prison.
I can't believe how little regard they have for their own family member here. Because look, let me just be a human for a second, put politics aside. What we saw on that debate stage on Thursday night was so utterly sad. I felt a tremendous amount of sympathy for Joe Biden. It was excruciating to watch, excruciating to hear. And here you have 2 of his closest family members urging him to continue. How do you watch what he was going through on that debate stage and think to yourself, no, let's urge him to continue doing this?
Yeah, well, there's 2 issues with that. Number one, who the hell's Hunter Biden? From last I heard, he was a modern artist. And so it's not just that he's only listening to Joe Biden and a little bit of Hunter Biden. It's that he is actively, and this is again reported by every outlet, actively not listening to his advisors. So he's not looking at polls, he's not looking at advisors, not looking at voters. He's actively fighting against the media now, the media that loved him a minute ago, right?
Right.
So the only people he's listening to are these folks. So Hunter Biden has no authority. He doesn't know anything about politics. In fact, look, Hunter Biden's an obvious con man, but we defended Joe Biden because I said, yeah, but he's got nothing to do with Hunter Biden. That's his son. What can he do? But now if Joe Biden's telling us, oh yeah, the only guy I'm gonna listen to is Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, well then, yeah, we need to know, is Hunter still on crack?
No, it's not about us. Hunter still on crack. See, it's Hunter Biden. See, it's something more nefarious going on here. Hunter has taken over the Biden crime family. You see, the big guy in that 10% shit, Hunter is the big guy now. And that's real, and that is real goddamn talk, man. Hunter gonna write himself a pardon too and act like Joe Biden did it. Y'all better believe that.
Being serious, because he's advising the president to do a maniacal thing that might cost us our democracy. And you're listening to a guy who is a Ukrainian gas expert? Come on, man. Super obvious. I feel my heart's broken for you that your son turned out to be a clown. But I'll defend you on that. but not if he's going to make the decisions.
Right.
That's insane.
Totally.
And now the second part of it is they have a vested interest, which is different than Joe Biden's, which is different than the Democratic parties or the countries. Hunter Biden is milking his dad and has his whole life. We've been very honest about that. Besides which, again, you'd have to do massive gaslighting not to pretend that Hunter Biden wasn't using his name to make money for these last 10, 20 years.
That is a good point, Cenk. That is a good point. And the other thing that I want to just bring up is think about the core campaign platform that the Biden campaign has rolled out. What has he been leaning on in order to win re-election? The notion that if Biden loses and Trump wins, well, democracy is on the line. It is the most consequential election for Americans to vote in, right? Because democracy is on the line, everyone. Yet they insist on allowing Biden to run re-election, even given what his debate performance was, even given the very obvious cognitive decline he has suffered. It is, look, even putting politics aside, if you were a Democrat, be honest with yourself. Are you comfortable with Joe Biden in that state of mind, running the country?
Yeah, but at this point, let's be honest. Now let's go to the number one culprit here, Dr. Jill Biden. So how does she know that he's been in this severe mental decline? Because she's the one person we all know knows, right? She's known it all along. Remember the Axios article that leaked over the weekend that said that he could only function between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m.
So depressing.
So first of all, you can't be president if your brain only functions for 6 hours a day.
Remember all the criticism Trump got? Justified criticism for all the executive time he likes to take, where he's literally just sitting his ass on a couch watching television. Democrats loved criticizing the Trump administration for that. But now we're gonna pretend like the president only working a few hours a day is totally fine when it's a Democrat?
And think about how thick the gaslighting is, that any of this works for 1 second. They bragged that the president could still function for a quarter of the day. That was a story they put out. That's unbelievable. So now how about the other 3/4 of the day? Well, Jill Biden is with him the entire time. So she knows how badly he has declined. She's known him for a long, long time. Why do you think he doesn't do any interviews? Why do you think he passed up the Super Bowl interview? Why do you think he doesn't do press conferences? Because Jill Biden is quote unquote protecting him. No, she's protecting herself from people finding out that Joe Biden is not in charge. She's in charge. So you can say, hey, look, I don't know if she's making decisions on bombing, not bombing, wars, etc. But I do know she's making the decision on whether to stay in the race or not. And that is, according to what every Democrat has told us for the last year, democracy's on the line, the most important election of our lifetimes. Hence, Jill Biden is making the most important decision, maybe in the history of this country, but she doesn't want you to know that. So that's why they're blaming the staff. That's why they're blaming moderators. They're like, why didn't they do a fact check of Trump? Why didn't you do a fact check of Trump? You're his opponent, you're right there. Why didn't you do it? That's because your brain has fallen out and your wife knows that. But at this point, it's impossible not to notice that Jill Biden is power hungry. And look, now I'm seeing all these pictures of her like putting out tweets saying, preparing for the G7, and she's got this big folder.
Yeah,
Why are you preparing for G7?
No one elected you to be president, okay? This is unbelievable to me. I can't, look, for many, many hours, maybe for a full day after the debate took place, there was something oddly comforting in the fact that everyone seemed to agree that Biden's performance was terrifying, that Biden is not fit to serve another 4 years as president. And then after, the Biden camp and the Biden family got together over the weekend and decided, no, he is not gonna drop out of the race. Well, then everyone needs to bow their heads, know their role, and provide cover for Biden as if we didn't all see what we saw last Thursday.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really
former Marine Corps intelligence officer, world famous weapons inspector, inveterate and indefatigable fighter and explainer of war and conflict. What's happening, what might happen next, and what lies beneath. Joins me again now for his regular war reports. Scott, I don't know where to start. Should I start perhaps in the Middle East? It looked, for a few hours at least, that Israel were going to go for it in Lebanon, and then it looked as if they'd blinked and pulled back. And then everybody started ordering their nationals to leave Lebanon. What's happening? Is the balloon about to go up there?
It's very dangerously so. I'm hoping that the Israeli Defense Force, which still has military professionals in its ranks who know reality when confronted by it. I need to remind your listeners that the last 2 years, Israel has, before October 7th, Israel ran major military exercises that were designed to stress test Israel. What that means is, what happens if all of Israel's enemies attack at once? How will Israel defend itself? And what Israel realized is that they can't, that there is no defense, that Israel will lose if they do the total fight. And this is pre-Gaza, meaning that the 2 war games that Israel participated in, thought of, planned out, didn't take into account a Gaza in revolt. They thought that the worst they'd get out of Gaza is an intifada. Instead, they have a full-scale war that's absorbed a significant part of the Israeli military capacity, even without a war in the north against Hezbollah. Israel can't do this, and the military knows it. But this isn't, again, we have to go back to the old adage, that goes back to Sun Tzu and Clausewitz. War is an extension of politics by other means. This is about the political survival of Benjamin Netanyahu, straight up. He is a desperate man who's unwilling to have his legacy be tarnished by the reality of his defeat against Hamas. And so he is prepared to sacrifice. And when I say sacrifice, I mean it in every sense of the word. Sacrifice Israel on the altar of his ego. Israel not only will not win a war against Hezbollah, Israel will be destroyed by a war with Hezbollah, because it won't just be a war with Hezbollah. The gloves will come off everywhere. Iran has already said, if Israel engages in a large-scale conflict with Hezbollah and Lebanon, that it will enter and it will be a war of annihilation. This is what we're talking about, the literal annihilation of the Israeli state. Egypt is massing troops at Rafah. If you think for a second, if Israel gets involved in a decisive, all-encompassing conflict with Hezbollah in the north, that Egypt will stand by idle in the south, think again. Nations that never would have thought of confronting Israel will jump on the Israeli carcass like a starving jackal, because there is a lot of animosity in the Middle East. Israel has built up a deep reservoir of hatred. And Israel goes down, and it will go down. It is going down. Israel will not survive what it has started. But Israel has a choice now to allow for the peaceful collapse of Zionism, because Zionism's day is over. It is finished. It is done. It is disgraced as an ideology. The world will not tolerate it. We are on the path toward a Palestine. It may take some time, but that's the direction we're heading. Or Israel can accelerate not only the timing of its defeat, but the scope and scale of the violence that will be attached to this defeat. If Israel goes to war against Hezbollah, Israel will be destroyed from the top to the bottom, from the river to the sea. That is a guarantee, and the Israeli Defense Force knows it. And here's where it gets dangerous, because Israel has factored in such a scenario, and it's called the Samson option. And that's the use of Israeli nuclear force. So for all the people out there cheering, saying, yeah, I can't wait till Hezbollah and Iran take it to Israel.
About the Samson option before, they never talk about that. Think biblically, what did Samson do? That's why they call it the Samson option. Samson brought the whole Colosseum down on his enemies. He prayed to to the Most High for one last hurrah, one last chance to take his enemies down, take the enemies of the Most High down. The Most High granted him his strength. He brought the Colosseum down. So these Zionists, their nuclear option is called Samson. The nukes are pointed all over the world, at Rome, all over the European capitals. They said this. And what they're threatening is if they go, everybody go.
Understand, these sick genocidal maniacs are prepared. These are the same people who embraced the Hannibal doctrine, the Hannibal directive. They kill their own people. They kill their own people, and they will take everybody down with them if it gets to that. So this is a very frightening moment right now in the world history. This isn't a continuation of, low-scale warfare. I mean, because let's be honest, what happened in Lebanon in the 90s and the 80s, the 90s, that led to Israel's withdrawal was low-scale warfare. Even August of 2006, low-scale warfare. What we're talking right now is nation termination. The scope and scale of the violence will be unimaginable on both sides. Lebanon will be devastated by this conflict, absolutely destroyed, because Israel will go down kicking and screaming. And at the last moment, when it becomes clear that the Zionist enterprise is about to collapse beneath the weight of the military might arrayed against it, they will lash out using their nuclear weapons. And then we have no idea where that takes us.
As you described that apocalypse, Scott, a number of questions come into my mind. Number one, why would the Israeli military allow such a low-rent individual as Netanyahu to bring about the country's destruction on the altar of his ego? Why would they not mount some kind of military coup? Why would they not at least engineer some kind of changing of the guard at the top of Israeli politics? Number two, why would the United States allow Israel to embark upon such an apocalyptic course? And why would Israel's other allies do so? And thirdly, on the Samson option, although you partly answered it yourself, they are ready to kill their own people. They killed a large number of their own people on October the 7th, pursuant to the Hannibal directive. You and I at least both know that firing nuclear weapons at Lebanon is a suicide mission because, of course, the wind is no respecter of national boundaries. And the radiation, the nuclear winter would afflict the state of Israel-Palestine just as completely as it afflicted the state of Lebanon, Syria. So have a go at answering those 3 points, if you will.
Absolutely. On the first one, understand that the prime minister is not a dictator. And in Israel, even though they lack a constitution, they have basic laws and they have precedents. At a time of war, decisions are made by a war cabinet. And Israel had a war cabinet that had incorporated you and I know that Benny Gantz is not a moderate, but compared to Benjamin Netanyahu, he can be painted as a moderate. In many ways, his ideas were equally as radical regarding Hamas and Hezbollah. But Benny Gantz was supposed to be the control rod to this nuclear reactor that is Benjamin Netanyahu. He has resigned, as have others. What Netanyahu now has done is created a new war cabinet that are of the most sick, mentally ill, mass murderous, genocide-embracing Zionists imaginable. These are people who, we know who we're talking about. These are people who go on social media and say things that are straight out of Adolf Hitler's playbook when it comes to the Palestinians. Yeah. In order to step in, the Israeli military would have to go against decades of an understanding about civil-military relationships, that the military is subordinated to civilian leadership. This would be a fundamental decision, and it may take place. They may be at that place right now because the Israeli military is not ready to commit genocide, at least, I mean, self-genocide, self-cleansing. And so we may see this revolt. Remember, before October 7th, Israel was in a fundamental crisis over Netanyahu's overreaching regarding the courts, the judiciary, etc. And at that time, the Israeli president said Israel is on the cusp of a civil war, not civil disobedience, a civil war with Israelis shooting Israelis because of the fundamental differences. If there was a military intervention, it would lead to a civil war. And all military leaders have to keep that in mind when they, in what they're thinking. But when you compare and contrast the options here, that is a better option than allowing Netanyahu to carry out actions which will result in the physical destruction of Israel and the Israeli people. So we'll see where the military, it's a big ask of the Israeli military right now to step in, because it goes against precedent and it will trigger a civil war. There's no doubt about that. There will be a civil war in Israel. And many Israeli officers understand that if there's a civil war, Israel's enemies could take advantage of that conflict, and it doesn't solve any problems. That maybe your best option is to go in strong against Hezbollah and hope for the best, as opposed to intervening and engendering the destruction of your own society. No general wants that on his shoulders. As for the United States, George, we're in the middle of the stupidest presidential silly season in American history, where nobody has the courage to stand up against Zionism, against Israel, against the Israeli lobby. The Israeli lobby is openly bragging about stealing Congress for Israel. They are bragging about it, how much money they put in. There was a race in New York where Israel put in $24 million, and they are bragging about how they bought a member of Congress. That's where we're at, George. You think any politician right now in this upcoming election will have the courage to stand up and say no to Israel? Joe Biden can't. He, especially after that last debate, his handlers won't let him do anything or let anything be said that further weakens his position. The Democrats are desperate, and the one thing they have going for them is the Jewish vote, is the Jewish lobby, is the Jewish money. I should say Zionist money, but increasingly it's becoming hard in America to differentiate between the two. So no, and no ally of Israel that isn't called the United States will go against the United States. No one will go against America. No one has the courage. No one has the stature to go against the United States on Israel. And so no one's going to step in and do the right thing. Normally we talk about, and I've spoken this in the past, friends don't let friends drive drunk. I've actually used that when I talk about America's relationship with Israel. I use that back in the old days, back when I was standing with Israel, hoping Israel could be turned into a nation capable of peaceful coexistence with the Palestinians. Clearly today it can't. But we don't do that anymore, which tells you that Israel is not the friend of America. We need to understand that, because friends don't let friends drive drunk. Israel is a tool that's used for America for its purposes. And right now, the Arab-Israeli conflict, the Palestinian conflict in Israel, is being used by American politicians to position themselves for victory in November, even though the cost of that victory could be Israel, could be the Middle East, could be the world. And then, lastly, about the nuclear weapons. Unfortunately, Israel, like the United States, has stopped talking about nuclear weapons as a force of deterrence, meaning I have nuclear weapons, we will only use them when an existential threat is brought up, and then the result would be so horrific that nobody will dare come at us. Israel today speaks of using weapons in Lebanon that have never been used before and have unprecedented levels of destruction. I believe Israel has developed a low-yield neutron bomb, the kind of bomb that the United States, kind of weapon the United States developed for use in Europe to appease the Germans, meaning that when the Soviets came across in the old Cold War, that we would use neutron bombs, highly intense radiation, minimal destruction, very low long-term contamination. The radiation in the blast kills people, and then a week later, you can come back in and live. The Israelis have developed these neutron bombs, and these are the weapons that Israel will start out with against Lebanon. They will be dropping these neutron bombs designed to take out Hezbollah, designed to collapse structures, etc. In the belief that there is such a thing as a limited nuclear war. What Israel doesn't understand, and I wish nations like Pakistan would make it more clear, that if Israel uses nuclear weapons, the prohibition against using nuclear weapons against Israel is lifted, and that inevitably Israel will be struck by a nuclear weapon that says made in Pakistan. Whether the delivery system is Pakistani or Iranian, we have yet to see, but Israel will not get away with using nuclear weapons, even if they are low yield, even if they are neutron bombs.
Apocalypse Now. My last question that I have time for, though I could speak to you all night, Scott. When you saw the commander-in-chief literally melt in front of an international television audience in Atlanta on Thursday, did you not think, this is similar to the question I asked about the Israeli power, will they really allow a two-bit politician like Netanyahu to destroy their entire state and people? For how long can the United States tolerate the fiction, but still pregnant with real possible disaster, of having a man with the nuclear codes, his finger on the nuclear trigger, who cannot bite his own nails, who you wouldn't send out to buy a loaf of bread, but has the ability to bring about the end of the world? I mean, explain that.
George, I can't explain American politics today, because in order to explain that, I'd have to explain while the other half of America would allow a man named Donald Trump with all of his fundamental faults to also be the representative. Yes, Donald Trump's brain works. That was clearly on stage. He's a man who is in complete control of his mental faculties, but he's a fundamentally flawed character. I just want to remind Americans that he withdrew us from the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, the treaty that I participated in to get rid of nuclear weapons. And because of America's actions, Russia today has made a decision to rearm itself with the weapons we once destroyed. This is a man who allowed John Bolton and Mike Pompeo to sabotage his North Korea denuclearization efforts. And as a result, today, North Korea is fully armed with nuclear weapons and is now in an alliance with Russia against the United States. This is a man who withdrew from the Iranian nuclear deal and now has created an extraordinarily destabilizing situation where Iran is pivoted away from the West to the East, forever lost to us. And so, we tolerate that. On Joe Biden, we stopped being a nation where we, the people, matter. I mean, as soon as we allowed corporate money to run rampant with Citizens United, the Supreme Court decision, the American people took themselves out of the equation. We are a nation that's literally run by anonymous, moneyed political and economic elites. There's a name for it. We can call it, I had one senior Biden administration official articulate it as the interagency, meaning this nebulous group of unelected professional, civil servants and military officers who are the power behind the president. We were told that Biden couldn't implement what he wanted to do in terms of nuclear posture because the interagency wasn't ready for it. My God. That's a statement from a Biden administration official saying that. We can call the interagency the establishment. We can call it the swamp. We can call it the deep state. But that's the reality. Joe Biden is not in control of America today. We saw that. That was clear on stage that that man is in control of nothing. So who is in control? And who voted for them? Who put them in power? Where are the constitutional checks and balances? George, my country is fundamentally broken right now, fundamentally broken. And if we, the people of the United States of America, in order to form a more perfect union, don't start embracing the document that begins that way in its preamble, the Constitution, and the values enshrined there, we are a lost cause, a fundamentally lost cause.
Wow. Powerful stuff. Scott Ritter, as always, a great, great honor to interview you. Scott Ritter, wow.
Russian armed forces once again did something with Iskander missile, blowing up a large hangar containing a number of foreign equipment that was being hidden, after being tracked by Russian UAV operators. The Russian Ministry of Defense released a video on June 28, 2024, providing a clear picture of what was actually being blown up in Shevchenkovo near the city of Nikolaev. The Zala reconnaissance drone located the position of the launcher of the United States M270A1 MLRS, and in cargo transports and trucks with ammunition were deployed. Apparently, Russian drone followed the movements of American MLRS to its hiding location, and Ukrainian operators opened hangars inside civilian infrastructure. Then, it is destroyed with an Iskander ballistic missile, which always manages to do its job in one hit. As a result of the attack, fires could be observed for a long time from the outskirts of the city by anyone with a window facing towards Kherson, who noted the destruction of targets and repeated explosions. The hangar houses NATO specialists responsible for maintaining and operating the system, as well as handling ammunition transportation, loading and trucking, and about 25 Ukrainian soldiers are located. After the explosion, it was reported that dozens of ambulances arrived in the area, stopped at the checkpoint and were held back until 3 military ambulances left the explosion site. Military ambulances transport senior officers of the armed forces of Ukraine or important foreign specialists. Again and again, NATO intended to bring its war equipment towards the Ukrainian theater, using overloaded trains, but they were completely destroyed by the Russian armed forces, which had just arrived at the train unloading site in Volnyansk, about 9 kilometers northeast of Zaporozhye. The Russian Ministry of Defense released footage on June 30, 2024, during yesterday's attack, of a train full of military equipment, preparing to be unloaded on the residential area. Before everything was resolved, The Russian Iskander-M missile that difficult for air defense to intercept suddenly appeared there, destroying everything. As a result of the missile strike and controlling the resulting fire attack using Supercam UAV, the target exploded strongly and burned heavily. Reportedly, US-made M113 armored personnel carriers, NATO fuel tanks, Buck M1 SAM, BMP-2, and other types of cargo and road transport, including 35 Ukrainian military personnel, were destroyed. A train of Ukrainian T-64 tanks also get hit.
Welcome to the show. You know, it's interesting how decisions made in the past can have unexpected consequences. What did President Trump do or order or authorize? I think it was back in 2019 that is having an effect today.
He withdrew the United States from the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, the INF Treaty. That treaty up to that point prohibited or put limits on both the United States and Russia's ability to build intermediate ballistic missiles, cruise missiles that would travel anywhere from 300 to 3,000 miles. And so that's particularly relevant. You know, the Russians have intercontinental ballistic missiles that can reach us, but this is more try to calm things down in Europe. So Trump pulls out of it. And I mean, it wasn't Trump's, Trump didn't wake up one morning and say, I'm going to, get rid of that agreement. He was recommended to him by, frankly, all these deep state operatives that he had put into his administration.
Let's see, his Secretary of State at the time was Mike Pompeo.
Yeah, just complete buffoons. Because so it's one thing, okay, we're going to withdraw from that treaty. So you think the next step is, let's start building those missiles, right? Wrong. We didn't do that because we couldn't do that. Meanwhile, Russia was putting out hypersonic missiles, but they were staying within the limits still of that treaty. That all ended on Monday. Monday, Vladimir Putin convened a National Security Council meeting in Russia. And he said, look, the United States is now talking about putting these intermediate nuclear weapons into Europe. We're gonna respond in kind. Big difference here is Russia can actually produce those missiles and deploy them while the West cannot.
Okay.
That's the fundamental difference.
A couple of questions. One, I'm remembering Ronald Reagan's famous one-liner. He had a number of them, as you know. Trust but verify.
Right.
Are the Russians trustworthy when we sign treaties with them? Did they, as far as you know, maybe Ritter knows this, but you know this stuff as well. Yeah. Did they comply with this treaty?
Absolutely.
Did we?
No. I mean, we are the ones that across the board have been abrogating these treaties. At no point did the Russians say, hey, you know what? We made a bad deal. Let's get out of this. No. It was George W. Bush that pulled us out of the anti-ballistic missile treaty back in 2001. And guess what? The Russians protested it initially. So what are you doing? Because they saw this as opening up the road for a country taking offensive action. Because if you work on developing anti-ballistic missile defenses, That means you're working to prevent anybody from attacking you, which means you have the ability to attack them. And yet, the United States walked away from it. And once again, it's not like we went to work, say, oh, yeah, let's upgrade that Patriot missile system. Let's come up with a robust air defense system. No, we're still using, 30, 35-year-old technology. Didn't spend any of the money on that. It's all the contractors in Northern Virginia got that money. They bought a bunch of houses. They got some fancy cars, but none of them went to improve U.S. national security. Russia, meanwhile, has built the S-400, the S-500, the S-550. And these are all very robust, capable air defense systems that outmatch anything that we can field.
Why are the Russians ahead of us when it comes to the ability to build these things?
Their economy is not held hostage to a congressional prostitution process. That's the only way to call it. The members of Congress are like hired prostitutes. The defense contractors are the paying customers. So, they go out and pay the members of Congress, and the members of Congress pony up favors. Only these favors are not sexual. They are monetary in nature. They provide all the money to the defense contractors. And so, like right now, Russia is building 155 millimeter artillery shells at a pace about 5 to 6 times what the United States does. And they're producing them for about $1,000 a shell. In the United States, we're paying $4,000 a shell. So, 4 times the price, and we're only getting maybe, 1/5, 1/6 the turnout.
Is the Russian munitions industry owned by the government, or is it private enterprise like it is here?
No, the government owns it. And so the government says, if it needs to get done, it's going to get done. But they've got some flexibility. They're tied in. They're actually tied into a central plan. And so when it comes to defense spending, we actually ought to have a central plan. This is, I'm not talking about the Soviet Union's central economic planning, which made the Soviet economy a disaster. Right. I'm talking about that when it comes to building up your defense products, you're building what you need to defend your country and to make sure your soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen can carry out operations with the best equipment that is integrated at a strategic and tactical level. Russia has that. We don't.
Okay, let's get back to where we started. How did Trump's decision in 2019 affect what's going on the ground or in the air in Ukraine today?
So by ending that treaty, number one, and again, it was set in motion by people working for Trump, but nonetheless, he signed off on it. It now put in place this notion that the United States is going to push these intermediate missiles and cruise missile and ballistic missiles into Europe. And so this is like a reprise of the Cuban Missile Crisis, except it's in reverse. So it's the Russians who are looking at the United States talking about bringing these intermediate nuclear missiles in. And Vladimir Putin was very clear on Monday when he convened the National Security Council, which you had Foreign Minister Lavrov, you had the new Defense Minister Belousov, and he said, "Okay, guys, here's the situation. This is what they're doing. This is what we're going to do to counter it. Tell me how you're going to get this accomplished." So this is now ratcheting it up.
Do they have these missiles on the shelf? Could they use them against Kyiv tomorrow?
Well, yeah, they certainly have, as they have been over the last 2 years. They've got the Kinshals, Iskanders. So they've got a variety of hypersonic missiles right now that they could use to hit Kiev in a heartbeat. What they have not developed are those hypersonics that they would hit London and Paris. That's what they're going to start producing. And so that, they've recognized they're at war with the West. There's no more pretense. They're no longer pretending that they're in some sort of peaceful coexistence with NATO. They recognize that NATO has declared war on Russia. NATO is taking provocative steps both to arm Ukraine as well as to put weapon systems in countries adjacent to Russia's borders that Russia views as a direct potential nuclear threat.
So
and they've made it clear they'll respond to take those out.
if we were not complying with the treaty, did Mike Pompeo and his colleagues know that? And if they did, why on earth did they give this advice to Trump?
Oh, they justified it by saying, "Oh, the Russians are cheating." They didn't offer any evidence of the Russians cheating, but I tell you the reason they ultimately did it. There's some money to be made. Hey, we get out from under those restraints. We can now. There's a whole new pack of weapons. We can have this defense industry build. The only problem with their calculations is they assumed that the United States still had a relatively intact industrial base and control of the essential metals, rare earth minerals needed to produce those weapon systems. And there was just a report that came out within the last 3 months where basically saying, hey, for almost every critical weapon system the United States builds, it's dependent on China. That if China cuts us off, we can't build those weapon systems anymore. And so what's our brilliant response? Hey, let's go to war with China.
Right.
Let's put sanctions on China.
Yeah,
Let's
we want to
threaten
take their
China.
resources.
And it's like, if you're trying to get a date with a girl, the last thing you want to do is call her fat and ugly. Okay?
Here's some breaking news, which is not very good. A missile attack has been launched on Crimea and Sevastopol. Local telegram channels have reported the strikes were reportedly carried out by the Ukrainian army. Now, this is where I need you to help us, Larry, with the use of Storm Shadow missiles on the Balakalovsky thermal power plant and the territory of the military unit. As a result, an explosion and fire occurred. The governor of Sevastopol said that the air defense system was activated and 5 missiles were shot down. He also said that several cars were damaged during the attack. No casualties have been reported so far. What are Storm Shadows? Are they U.S. or British?
Those are British. That's the British version of like our ATACMS missiles. It goes a little farther than the ATACMS. I think it's maximum range about 210.
Right. So if this report is accurate, you have the Ukrainian military using Western gear, here British, to attack civilians in Sevastopol, as if what happened on the beach 2 Sundays ago wasn't enough.
Right. And the good news out of that, it looks like the Russian air defense system once again worked to down those. They hit them, but this is the problem. You've seen those videos out of people at a Middle East wedding where they're firing their machine guns up in the air.
Right.
Well, the bullets go up. There's this thing called gravity. They come back down. And so when you shoot down one of these missiles, there's still that it doesn't disintegrate it. There's metal chunks and pieces that fall to the ground. It can severely injure, if not kill, civilians or actually military personnel.
So mainstream media has been stating that that's what happened 2 Sundays ago on Sevastopol, that they shot down a missile and the debris from it, which included cluster bombs, landed on the beach, as if it was the fault of the Russians that their own people were killed. It was American gear. It was American technology. It was American intel. It was American human beings downloading the intel.
Yeah, this was, again, I go back to the simpler analogy that people can understand easily. This was the mother who gave her 6-year-old child a gun and loaded it for him. Didn't necessarily say, hey, go shoot teacher X. But once you give a loaded gun to that kid, all of a sudden, when they pull the trigger, you are as responsible as the person pulling the trigger or pressing that trigger. And in this case, the United States, by giving them these, they gave them the loaded gun, the ATACMS missiles. And then they gave them the intelligence information required to target those missiles. And then they were providing the training and assistance to the Ukrainians so they know how to launch those missiles. Probably the only thing they didn't do was say, hey, see if you can kill a few civilians on the beach. I don't think the Americans did that, but who cares? Because at this point, you're an accessory to murder. That's all it is.
Who has hypersonic missiles today?
Russia and China. United States doesn't. In fact,
And how far do they go? Can something fired from Moscow hit the mainland U.S.?
Well, yes, but it's not so much the distance involved; it's the speed involved. So the hypersonic, as I understand it, is basically Mach 5 and above. And what's happened is not only do they go extremely fast, because one of the technical issues that a lot of that the United States has run into is when you have a rocket or a ballistic missile traveling that fast through the atmosphere, just like we saw spacecraft returning from space, they would burn up. The bottoms of them because of the heat of the friction from passing through the air. So that was one of the real challenges that the Russians and Chinese had to solve. They've solved it. We haven't. And so those missiles, not only do they move fast, but they are also maneuverable, which means they can't be shot down, despite all the claims of, the Ukrainians. Oh, we shot down 100 of them. It's nonsense. They haven't shot them down.
Why is it that we don't have them?
I guess we haven't thrown enough money at the defense contractors. God knows we've been throwing a lot. Well,
$886 billion a year, and they can't build these missiles that our adversaries have, supposed adversaries.
It's just symptomatic of the further decline of the United States, from which was once an industrial, technological leader in the world. Right now, we got 2 astronauts up in space that they can't get back to Earth because we don't have a damn rocket to bring them back on. Ours broke. So now we're going around like some panhandler going to Elon Musk. Hey, Elon, could you give us a lift? We got a pickup in outer space. And worst of all would be if we had to go beg the Russians, because the Russians have been the one up until about 2 years ago that were regularly taking our astronauts to the space station because we no longer had the rocket capability. Well, if we can't build a rocket that can get to the space station, why in the name of God did we think we could build one that would be hypersonic that nobody could shoot down?
Have the Russians stopped cooperating with us because of the war in Ukraine and because Tony Blinken won't talk to Sergei Lavrov?
Not entirely. They put us on notice that, hey, our joint space station thing? Yeah, that's done. We're going our own way. Have a nice day. They're going to move off and they will develop their own. They'll work with the Chinese. They'll work with the Indians. And to be candid about it, the leading countries right now in terms of outer space exploration are China, India, and Russia, not the United States. So the United States, which, prided itself in the 60s on, we were the first ones to the moon and all that. Boy, talk about living on our laurels. There's no laurels left to live on.
How do you read Foreign Minister Lavrov's statement to the American ambassador to Russia? We are no longer at peace with you.
Yeah.
Tell your buddies, your colleagues in Washington.
Yeah, it put us on notice that you're one step from war. And there's already talk of the Russians downgrading diplomatic relations so that they could, withdraw most of their diplomatic personnel back to Russia. In fact, the United States has already taken punitive action against the Russian embassy here. They've shut down visa centers that were in New York and Washington, D.C., because they're wanting to make it more difficult, if not impossible, for any American to travel to Russia. So, for example, if I go back to Russia, I'm going to have to either fly to like Istanbul and spend a day or two there wandering the city and going to the embassy to get a visa, or go to a place like Mexico City. So, the United States, instead of taking steps to try to calm the crisis, trying to say, let's recognize we're both nuclear powers. The last thing we need to do is have 2 countries that are nuclear powers at each other's throats. Let's find a peaceful path forward. Get Joe Biden to say that 3 times quick, huh?
Yes, please.
But we're not doing that. And then what we saw out of the presidential debate last week ago, Thursday, the rest of the world has now awakened and gone, good God, nobody's in charge.
Yeah.
Nobody's in charge. In fact, that's the question. Who's calling the shots? Who do we
Well,
talk to?
when Joe Biden decides to send a few $100 million to Israel, genocide notwithstanding, who actually makes that decision, Larry? Do we know?
No, we don't. It's likely, we know that probably Jake Sullivan's involved. Maybe Anthony Blinken, the chief of staff, really Biden's chief of staff, and I don't recall his name. I need to get it committed to memory because that's the real guy running the country. That chief of staff is the one who's signing off, who's making the decisions, and we don't know what kind of person he is.
Is Israel attacking Hezbollah as we speak?
Yes. Yeah. No, they're launching airstrikes, and hey, Hezbollah's turning around and giving it back as good as they're getting.
Does not the IDF and does not Prime Minister Netanyahu recognize what you and everybody else on this show has said, that Hezbollah is not Hamas, and you're going to get more than a bloody nose?
No, they don't. I mean, they are in. They've grown up to start believe their own nonsense, and that's what's dangerous. You know what? It's one thing to look in the mirror and and tell yourself you're the best athlete in the world, even though when you come and get an objective assessment and say, let me see if I got this right. You're 5'5", you weigh 350 pounds, and you haven't walked a block in 3 years. I don't think you're going to get that athlete designation, and that's where we are. I mean, we literally, you've got Israel thinking, oh, we got the best military. We got the most professional military. They say that. And then what we've watched over the last 8 months in Gaza, where you've got Israeli troops completely out of control, completely undisciplined, no good combat leadership. You got troops shooting their own people, for God's sake. And not just once, on multiple occasions. And so you've demonstrated that the only thing the Israelis are good at are killing women and children.
Did you recently write, or maybe you told me, that the IDF is exhausted and fearful and does not want to go to take on Hezbollah?
Well, that's been written. I wish, I have not written that myself precisely, but that has been reported. You've got reservists who are saying, no, we're done. And plus the psychological, the Israelis are running into the same thing that the German Wehrmacht, the professional soldiers, ran into when they invaded Poland and then Ukraine, the territory we now know as Ukraine back in World War II. Remember when they were lining up all these Jewish civilians and men, women, and children and pits and shooting them. Well, what they discovered, and this is why the gas chambers were ultimately developed, is it caused tremendous psychological trauma to a lot of these soldiers. They weren't all monsters. They were still human beings. And all of a sudden, they were sitting there recognizing they had killed children, babies. They had killed young women. They'd killed people that looked like their mothers. And they could, it was psychologically damaging them. And the professional part of the German Wehrmacht, not the SS, but the Wehrmacht, they came forward and said, oh, okay, this has got to stop because you're making our guys' combat ineffective. And that's one of the main motivations that led to the development of first the gas fans and then later the actual gas chambers.
Are IDF soldiers who are not, by and large, professionals, who are basically draftees, are they suffering from the same, whatever you want to call it, blowback from slaughtering Palestinians?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a growing number. There have been reports in the Israeli press, not just Haaretz, sort of the left-leaning one, but in others, that the number of traumatized reservists that have served in Gaza and been witness to these things, they're in great need of counseling. And you're getting suicides. You're getting some of the same things you've seen within our own military personnel, where people who were just ultimately stressed out by the combat against civilians ended up taking their own lives.
So I don't know if you know this person, but the president of the United States is
we got a president.
I just lost his name. Jeff Zients, Zients. I don't know this fellow. Do you?
No, I don't. But and I didn't even hear. Usually you hear about the Washington insiders like Ron Klain, who used to be the chief of staff.
Right. Ron was
Jeff
very well known.
Zients.
Ron even used to show up at Fox when I was there, but this Jeff Zients I never heard of.
Yeah, never heard. And so this is the power behind the throne.
Wow.
Now, what's fascinating is watching the food fight that's underway as the Biden families blaming Jeff and Anita Dunn and some others. This was all your fault that Joe stared off into space and couldn't remember what he was saying. You know.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
accountability, American style.
Right. Right. Just as an aside, Judging Freedom is up to 399,936 subscriptions. So we may break 400,000 while you and I are chatting. And if not, it'll be very, very shortly thereafter. For all the work you've done for us, I thank you, Larry, from the bottom of my heart. This is just an extraordinary number. Our goal was 400,000 by the 4th of July, which is Thursday.
Yeah.
Our next goal is 500,000 by Christmas, but we exceed 20,000 a month. We have 6 months till Christmas, so we should be able to reach that. How much longer do you think Ukraine can go on, no matter what Jeff Zients sends over there?
Yeah. Well, there was already reports today of an attempted coup that was thwarted. So this is it's starting to unraveling faster. And as we talked about on Friday, when you had Zelensky now saying time is short, and boy, we're getting a lot of dead and wounded. And since he said that, the number of dead and wounded have been going up dramatically. And it's what we're looking at here is a more rapid unraveling of Ukraine than many expected. The Biden folks are hoping and praying they can keep it intact until after the election, because the last thing they want to see is another August debacle like happened in Afghanistan in August of 2020.
Right. Larry Johnson's a pleasure, my dear friend. I know we covered both Ukraine and
we told Ukrainian leaders lots of fairy tales about how they were going to join NATO and live happily ever after. And it was a great illusion that we sold to Ukraine, not for Ukraine's sake, by the way, but for the sake of U.S. Aggressive foreign policy, what we call neoconservatism. The idea, the plan from the 1990s onward was that the U.S. would assert its unipolar, dominant, hegemonic primacy position in the world. And it would do so in part by extending the U.S. Military to all regions of the world, including surrounding Russia, including possibly breaking up Russia. And Ukraine was a major part of that strategy, which dates back, incidentally, to 1992, to ideas of Richard Cheney, who in 1992 was the defense secretary, and of course, who in 2001 became vice president of the United States. Another part of this neoconservative plan was to overthrow governments that the United States did not like. And that included the wars of choice in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya, and a coup that the United States actively participated in Ukraine in 2014. So we sold a fairy tale to Ukraine. The Ukrainian leaders bought it. I have to say, I've been telling them all along, though they didn't like to hear it from me, that's for sure, that we were on a path to make Ukraine the Afghanistan of Europe, as I frequently called it. By that, I meant a country devastated by a U.S. provoked war of choice because the U.S. overreached what it can do at the great expense of another place on the planet. So this is the sense that I said that Ukraine exemplifies a often quoted aphorism attributed to Henry Kissinger, attributed, by the way, by William Buckley from a conversation with Kissinger, in which Kissinger said to be an enemy of the United States is dangerous, but to be a friend is fatal.
This is probably the classic, even though they're both have passed on, the classic example of that. I mean, you're familiar with the inch-and-a-half thick agreement that Ukraine and Russia negotiated in Turkey in March of 2022, initialed by the Russian and Ukrainian negotiators, which would have prevented 10 million people from fleeing Ukraine and 500,000 Ukrainian soldiers from being killed or seriously wounded. Ukraine's infrastructure would still be intact. The Russians would have their comfort zone, and there would have been no NATO. Now, if that happens, it's going to happen after 10 million people have left, and after 500,000 people are dead or seriously wounded, and after the infrastructure is destroyed.
It's exactly right. Exactly right what you're saying, of course, and it also reflects a certain attitude, because those in charge in the United States will shrug their shoulders and say, well, we tried. They don't count the dead. They don't count the losses. They don't count the destruction. They're not held accountable for this. To make these points, one is accused of being a Putin apologist, rather than actually knowing the history and knowing the facts, because we're in the world of spin. So the world of spin says that what Russia did in February 24th, 2022, that is its special military operation, was unprovoked, the word we've discussed many times. That's the spin. The fact of the matter is it was provoked and it was entirely avoidable. And this is what is so tragic and what is still playing out. Now we see, and it's alarming, we actually do not have a president who can negotiate right now. I've been saying every day negotiate. We saw in the debate, it actually probably literally could not happen right now. This is completely alarming.
But we do have a Secretary of State who has rejected his core responsibility in that job, which is to communicate with other high-ranking diplomats of other countries so as to minimize war and minimize killing. Rather, they don't even talk. I mean, the Secretary of Defense spoke to the Russian Foreign Minister of Defense after the killings on the beach in Sevastopol, I guess because the Foreign Minister of Russia warned the U.S. ambassador to Russia, tell your guys back in Washington, we are no longer at peace.
This is, of course, something that is stunning to see. I had a personal experience in this. I was invited to speak to a group of foreign ministers online, and that included the Russian foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov. It included Antony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, and it included other leaders. And when I joined online, first it became apparent to me that the G7 foreign ministers were literally not speaking one-to-one or directly, let me say, with Lavrov, even though they were in the same room. It was so contrived. It was like a junior high school clique. Well, we're not talking to them. he's on the other side.
When was
And,
this, Professor?
yeah, I don't want to get too specific, but it was during this period from 2022 onward.
Okay.
The war was raging, and there was an occasion where I was invited to speak. And it's amazing to me how grown-ups can act like children, and worse, because I'm often reminded children don't act so badly. But if you're in a room together and a war is going on, you talk with each other. You don't make it the point precisely, we don't talk to the other side. This is what has been happening in this world in recent years. I put a huge responsibility for this on Blinken, because as you said, this is his job. He should understand his job is to talk to, quote, the other side, even an adversary. He is our Secretary of State. He is our chief diplomat. We can't end these conflicts other than through diplomacy. We are not ending this on the battlefield. All we're doing on the battlefield is ending lives. This has to be ended through diplomacy. And the idea, which is sometimes said, well, you can't talk to them, they're evil, they won't keep their word, there's no diplomacy, there's no possibility of diplomacy, excuse me. This is so factually wrong, it's unfortunate to say it's almost the opposite. If you ask between the US and Russia, who has kept one's word and who has not, it is not Russia that is the one that repeatedly has violated its word. And so the idea, well, that side's so evil that we can't even speak to it, is not only wrong as a principle of how to search for peace, but it's factually wrong in terms of what has actually transpired. Because by my count, and I've been there at a lot of this in direct role and seen it, it was the United States that promised that NATO would not enlarge. That goes back to 1990. It was the United States that told Mikhail Gorbachev and told Boris Yeltsin, no, now we have a trusting mutual relationship. It was the United States intercepted in the phone call between the Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland and the U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Piat, in January 2014 that was plotting the post-Yanukovych government. How dare the United States plot the government of Ukraine on a phone call, by the way, that was intercepted by the Russians and posted online for all of us to hear. It was the United States that supported diplomatically in the UN Security Council the Minsk II agreement, and then privately said to the Ukrainians, don't do it. You don't have to do it. It was the United States that rejected diplomacy at the end of 2021. It was the United States that intervened, as you said, to stop an agreement in March 2022. And then we say there's no one to talk to. You can't do diplomacy. They don't keep their word. By the way, on strategic issues, that is nuclear arms issues, it's the United States, not Russia, that unilaterally abandoned the anti-ballistic missile treaty in 2002. And it's the United States that unilaterally walked out of the Intermediate Nuclear Force Treaty in 2019. Oh my God. Well, I'm not saying the other side is perfect, but the idea that we're so pure, they're so evil that we don't even talk. This is absurdly opposite to the truth.
You have painted a fascinating and terrifying picture. We're going to take a break for a commercial announcement. When we come back, I'm going to ask Professor Sachs if, notwithstanding all those things that the United States did to harm Ukraine, when we come back, if Ukrainian politicians still think the United States will save them. after this. You all know that I am a paid spokesperson for Lear Capital, but I'm also a customer, a very satisfied customer. About a year ago, I bought gold and it's now increased in value 23%. So $100 invested in gold a year ago is now worth $123. If you have $100 in the bank, it still shows $100, but $100 in the bank is now worth 24% less. Inflation has reduced all of your savings, all of your buying power, and mine, by 24%. And gold is largely immune from that. If you want to learn how gold will soon hit $3,200 an ounce, call Lear Capital, 800-511-4620, or go to LearJudgeSnap.com. Get your free gold report. Same experts who predicted the 23% rise that I've enjoyed have predicted this $3,200 an ounce gold. Learn about how to transfer this to an IRA. Protect your savings. But Professor Sachs, we're the envy of the world.
We're the envy of the world. Name me a single major country president who wouldn't trade places with the United States of America for all our problems and all our opportunities. We're the most progressive country in the world in getting things done. We're the strongest country in the world. We're a country in the world who keeps our word, and everybody trusts us. All of our allies and those who he coddles up to, from Kim Jong-un, who he sends love letters to, and Putin, etc. They don't want to screw around with us.
Doesn't know what he's talking about, obviously.
Well, it's very sad. I am in Southeast Asia now, and I'm speaking to leaders around the world, and it's unfortunately not at all like President Biden seems to think. He does live in the rhetoric of the 1990s, which got us started in this neocon era. That was the rhetoric and arrogance of triumphalism. It was reflected in Richard Cheney's ideas in 1992 that helped set a new course of foreign policy based on what President Biden believes to this day, that we are the unrivaled, unipolar, sole superpower, indispensable nation of the world, and can do what we want, and no one can, quote, stop us. That is what has gotten us into so much trouble. It's the defining idea of neoconservatism, of which Biden has been a full-fledged member from the time that he was in the Senate, and then vice president, and now president. But he lives in the past, I'm sorry to say. The world is not like he thinks it is. The world does not look up to the United States with trust. The world looks to the U.S. with great anxiety. The world looks at the debate that just occurred, and I know how many leaders around the world are shaking their heads, asking what happened to the United States.
All right,
but the idea, yes, so this is really the point.
Do the Ukrainian politicians, whether it's President Putin or the people around him or the people in parliament or the head of the military, whoever is still in some official capacity of power, because Zelensky is not, still think the United States is their friend, and still think, after that litany you ticked off before the commercial break, after the absurdity that you just analyzed of what the president thinks, do the Ukrainian politicians still think the U.S. will bail them out?
Look, some of the politicians like Zelensky are, it's so personal. It's maybe even life or death for them as individuals, what they say. There's a very, very hard right, neo-Nazi paramilitary part of Ukraine that has been part of Ukraine's governance in recent years. And I've been told by senior people, well, Zelensky doesn't really have any choice. It's his life or death. I don't know whether that's true or not, but I would say that, of course, Ukraine right now is ruled by a very small clique There is rampant corruption. There is bleeding out on the battlefield. Ukraine is losing across this long contact line land and often 1,000 to 2,000 people every single day right now. And the Ukrainians that are in charge, this small number that are operating extra constitutionally. This is a de facto government. It's not elected. It's past its term. It has no constitutional basis. Well, I don't know what they're really hoping. But what is happening is, of course, that they are losing and losing badly. And the people of Ukraine have no choice. The people of Ukraine are not asked, they're not given a say at the ballot box or even in any public discourse. And what we do know is that people are trying to flee Ukraine. They're trying to cross the rivers into Eastern Europe from Ukraine. They're dying. They're being shot. They're being grabbed off the streets and sent to the front lines to die. We see horrendous videos. I get emails about this of people who know neighbors or friends who are grabbed from their homes or off the street and sent to the front lines. So this is fighting to the last Ukrainian, as the awful expression goes, that the U.S. will fight to the last Ukrainian. The cynical but operational idea that the United States will continue to arm and finance this useless, losing cause because it's not American soldiers dying.
Yes.
It's terrible, but also we do not have a functional White House in the United States. So I don't know whether a functional president would do something different. We would hope so, but I'm extremely worried that we don't even have a functional president.
If when you were speaking to G7 and other foreign ministers, Tony Blinken had stood up and said, but wait a minute, Professor Sachs, Ukraine has a right to join NATO. How would you have responded?
This is one of the basic strange ideas. We say as a US government, when Russia said, don't do it, don't bring your missiles and your army to our border, the United States says, and this is literally what the US says, it's none of your business. So we tell Russia, it's none of your business if we bring our missiles to your border. So I ask every American to think of how the US government would respond if Mexico or the Bahamas, I don't want to get any country into trouble, but suppose as a thought experiment that they invited and Russia accepted or China accepted that they're going to put military bases on the Rio Grande or just off the coast of the United States. Now, we know, because it's not a hypothetical, that exactly that happened in 1962 when the Soviet Union put a base with offensive nuclear missiles into Cuba. We nearly ended the world in nuclear war. We nearly came to nuclear war. We didn't say, oh, that's Cuba's choice. They can do what they want. We believe in a free choice. The answer clearly is whatever Ukraine might want, are we out of our minds in the United States to push right up to Russia's border and think that this is safe for Americans, that this is safe for the world? Of course, it is horrendously dangerous for Russia, a point that Russians have been making for 30 years, which is if your missiles are a few minutes away, we have to launch on a absolutely instantaneous judgment. Everything can go wrong. The world can get destroyed. Have some sense. the Russians have been saying to the United States.
Right,
so maybe the Ukrainians want it, but it's reckless and foolhardy and a kind of behavior the United States has rejected for 201 years since the Monroe Doctrine, and rejected in practice when it occurred. And by the way, the Monroe Doctrine is not some dusty document that you read about in high school. It was invoked. I was sitting there in the UN General Assembly. It was invoked by Donald Trump in a speech to the UN General Assembly, to the world leaders during his term as president. It's a current active position of the United States. So the whole point of this NATO open door is absurd and reckless, and a point that I've made directly to the White House, and of course, without satisfaction.
How do you interpret Foreign Minister Lavrov's statement, "We are no longer at peace with you"? He didn't say we're at war with you. Obviously, unlike Tony Blinken, he's willing to communicate. He's willing to use diplomatic phrases, but there have to be implications to a statement made like that by the foreign minister of Russia to the United States ambassador to Russia.
An American missile landed on a beach where Crimeans, civilians, were bathing and sunbathing, and a large number of people were killed or injured. Now, that attack of missile was had its coordinates set by the United States. The Ukrainians don't do it. They don't know how to do it. The U.S. is directly engaged in firing missiles at Russians, and in this case, at civilians on a beach. And it's sometimes at Russians within Russian territory, because that's another green light that Antony Blinken and Jake Sullivan and Lloyd Austin and maybe the president, though who knows what he actually does anymore. But in any event, what they have authorized. So this is what Russia is saying. You are directly attacking us. This isn't that you've handed over weapons and Ukraine is doing it. The United States is programming the directions, is providing the quote intelligence. So it's not very intelligent, but we have our drones collecting the targeting information over the Black Sea for these missile attacks. This is so dangerous. This is shockingly dangerous. It has to stop.
I wish that you could speak to Tony Blinken directly. I don't know that he'd listen, but I wish you could. I'm profoundly grateful that you are with us. You are a man of history as well as of knowledge, and people do listen to you. They don't always follow what you say, but at least they listen to you to be able to.
Well, we're going to keep pushing because we absolutely are in danger until the United States changes course and sits down and negotiates.
No question about it. Professor Sachs, thank you.
Coffee. Follow me.